There we go. Here I am today with the powerful Tony Farina, but we're not here to focus on Tony, or his book deal, or his amazing podcasts, or anything else that's amazing about him, but there will be details in the show notes. Instead, we're focusing on the world's biggest small band ever, or the smallest big band ever, however you want to frame it, but it's Weezer. And any listeners, there will be video to this. Go onto YouTube, and you'll see Tony doing the vague Weezer symbol, so it's all good fun. He's going to do that the entire 2 hours. So
that's it. That's all
he's
I'm
not
gonna
allowed.
I'm just going to do this. I'm not going to speak. This is the only time I'm going to speak.
You should have written Weezer on your hands as well, and then
no, it doesn't say Weezer on my hand. It has something else written on my hand. But yes, I'm a handwriter. You know, because when you're a forgetful person, yeah, you know what you can't do? Lose your hand.
That's a good point. I mean, I'm surrounded, video people will be aware, I'm surrounded by Post-it notes. So there's my notebook, I've got my notebook, which is one of my now 8 notebooks to podcasting, 3 of which are full up. Nice. 3 are full up from podcasting. The rest are kind of blank apart from this one on my guest book. And then I've also just got Post-it notes all around me and stuff. Some of them, like this one, is just what Star Wars comics I'm doing for the next month. It's not that people think there's some sort of magic behind how I choose my next Star Wars episode. It's normally just write it all down and go,
that one's next.
That one?
I haven't read. Have I read that book yet? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Did I get that copy yet? Yeah. For sure.
But we're talking about Weezer. So Weezer are, as I said, they're the biggest small band ever, and there's a sketch which I'll put in the description that SNL released that Tony showed me a while ago. It only came out about 4-5 years ago. I think it was just before Black came out, and it's very, very accurate. And it's funny because since I've told people how much I've been getting into Weezer, and then the way I describe them is they've surprised me by becoming one of my all-time favorite bands without me even knowing, because I got my Spotify Wrapped the end of this year, and obviously you and I, we've been talking about doing this Weezer thing since Seasons was announced, so the whole of 2022.
Yeah, we've been waiting for this for a year.
We have been, and there was a kind of thoughts of this sort of thing, but when Seasons came out, we were like, let's do it. And there was a couple of Weezer albums I've been slowly making my way through the discography, but I hadn't. There's a few albums I hadn't sort of listened to, so I've spent the year making sure I listen to it in free time, not like every day. But Spotify came out and went, oh yeah, Weezer's your favourite band by quite a lot. And I was like, are they? And then I was like, oh wait, no, I've got over 100 songs of them. I like more songs of them than some of my favourite bands have released in total. So they've snuck up, and I've found myself constantly talking to my friends about Weezer, and none of them give a shit. At all. No one cares. One of my friends went, you know what, I haven't really listened to Weezer properly. What's the best album? And this isn't, I'm not spoiling necessarily what I'm saying the top album is, but now my recommended to them is OK Human, very orchestral. And then I heard back from them, and they said, yeah, I listened to a couple of tracks, we couldn't get into it. And I'm like, you didn't even finish the album. I was like, how can you judge an album and not even finish it?
It's like 32 minutes long, too.
No Weezer albums. This is the funny thing. I've noticed that no Weezer albums, excluding deluxe editions and stuff, surpass 40 minutes. They're pretty much all between 30 and 34. 34 minutes is a real... I've noticed there's at least 5 albums of theirs that are 34 minutes long. It's like... I used to think 30 minutes is too short for an album, but now in the age of Spotify and all that stuff, I'm like, I'd rather 30-minute albums, because then we don't get an hour album with only about 15 minutes of actual good music in there. But before I get into all our Weezer stuff, and what we're kind of doing, we're basically personally ranking the albums. Some we're going to kind of skit over because they're not as exciting to talk about. We're going to focus on our top albums and maybe the bottom, and then we've also got a list of our favourite kind of songs. But this podcast is going to serve specifically, and I'll put it in the intro, but if you're on YouTube, there is no intro, so here it is. This podcast is going to be a variety of things to different people. To Weezer fans, it's probably going to be offensive. It's going to really, especially my list, is going to really upset some people. Then it's also serving as an introduction, because many people in the Comics and Motion Discord and stuff, a lot of my friends are like, yeah, I've heard the singles from their first album. I've heard Buddy Holly. I've probably heard Islands in the Sun, and that's literally it. And I used to be the same, because I was like, those singles aren't that good, and kind of stand by that to a degree, but we'll get to that. Not necessarily Islands in the Sun, I think their first album, but
sure. Yeah.
Basically this is kind of serving as also a way, I'm hoping that at least one person listening will go, okay, I'll give Weezer a listen. I'll check out a couple of the songs. I'd say if you've never really listened to Weezer before, listen to some of our tracks that we say is our favourites, and then kind of dip in and out. That's all I've been doing for the last 3 years, is just every now and then I'm like, I kind of fancy something easy listening that's not Ed Sheeran. And it's a bit more rocky, a bit more edgy, a bit of everything, but still kind of rocky. Weezer. But before we delve into that, I asked very late because I'm atrocious at asking people questions unless the episode is only to ask audience questions. But very briefly, I asked people on Discord if they had anything to say about Weezer. So I know I'll forget this because when we get into our conversations, the blinkers go on. So I'm getting all that stuff out of the way so we can just talk because you haven't really said a word yet. So I'm just going to read out.
So hello, Mike. You're looking handsome today. The beard looks great.
Thank you, good sir. Yeah, it's nice and thick, luscious. Yeah. And you're looking very good. You're looking quite thin, looking like you've lost a bit of weight.
Yeah, I have. Yes.
Yeah, and you're looking even sexier than usual.
Ooh.
But we're not here, to fluff Tony. As much as I'd love that.
Chris would say, "You're not here to be my fluffer."
No, exactly. No, I don't need to do that. But we've got there's like 5 comments from Discord because I didn't put it out into the universe, so I'm sorry, friends. Just of what people think about Weezer. So I'm just going to very quickly go through them, and then it'll be more of a free roam, and I'll get Tony to tell his Weezer origin story.
I can't wait.
I asked in Discord, and Spider Dan and the Secret Boars, he said, I saw them at Leeds Fest 2010, barely listened to them prior. They seemed to have a very chill indie sound, but seeing them live, they were anything but. Energetic and anarchic, oh my god, like anarchic, dragging people up on stage constantly, one of the best performances that weekend. They asked for any requests. One of the people in the crowd near us, too far from the stage to be heard, jokingly said, play Teenage Dirtbag by Weezer, and they immediately started playing and the crowd went sane. People started looking at this guy like he was Dr. Manhattan. Now, I will say with that story, I actually first saw I've only seen Weezer once, and I first saw them at a festival around 2010, and they played Teenage Dirtbag by Weezer.
So you were there.
Not at the same one, no, but it must have been, like, he was at Leeds Festival, and I went to Sonosphere, which wasn't in Leeds, it was in somewhere else that I can't, Nebworth, I think. But I'd never really listened to Weezer much, and that was my first experience of them playing a song by Weezer, which is the band name with the closest name to them possible, so causing as much confusion as possible. Then a couple more comments. Dave Horrocks, the Podfather, said, can't say I'm familiar with them at all. Outside of their popular hits, it's strange I don't recall them from the mid-90s. We were being flooded with Britpop bands around that time, but I don't remember them playing at any of the rock nights. I do remember Buddy Holly and Hashpipe being on regular rotation of Kerrang TV in the early 2000s. Max Byrne said their cover of Africa is fun. And then Blake Byles said, I first encountered them via Buddy Holly appearing on the Windows 95 CD. I spent a lot of time on the family PC in the 90s and really enjoyed firing up that video, marvelling at the editing, how they spliced themselves into the footage. As I grew up and became an editor myself, I could easily see the tricks and parts where it didn't work, but they left it in. It was an extremely creative video to accompany an extremely catchy jam. I wouldn't say I know their whole catalogue, but when they get it right, they really get it right. So lots of interesting comments, and each of those comments you could break apart. I'm sure we'll talk about the music videos at some point and stuff. But Tony, you are in a lot of ways the reason for my Weezer. I wouldn't even say rebirth, kind of me really opening the door to Weezer.
The Weezer science.
Yeah, exactly. So the Weezer sphere? What got you into Weezer? Because you're a little bit older than me, even though you look the same age. Because you're very, very young looking.
Thank you. Yeah.
Tell us.
So the first album, the Blue Album, came out in '94. It wasn't called the Blue Album then. Yeah. Your birth year, and yes. I was my junior year of college.
So Weezer have been about as long as I've been alive, basically.
Yeah. Or
if not slightly before, technically.
Yeah,
demos.
Uni, as you guys would say. So it's my junior year of university. But I went to a college, which again, it's a whole thing. Which I'm learning as I'm writing a book that takes place in England. Wow, words. Anyway, so it just came out. So I was a resident assistant my sophomore and junior year. So I had cable in my room, which in the early 90s, that was a big deal. Not everybody did that. Like most people didn't have cable in their TV, in their dorm rooms. There was like a big room. So I had it though, because I was an RA. And so MTV was on, and I grew up, I'm an MTV person, like MTV when I was like 12, 13, we got it. So MTV was always a big thing. So late at night, there would be a thing called 120 Minutes, which was an overnight show. It was on, I think, on Saturday nights, and then Sunday nights was Headbangers Ball, or it was the other way around. One of them, I watched them both. Actually, Smells Like Teen Spirit actually debuted on Headbangers Ball before it became alternative. They thought, oh, this is going to be a metal band. So they released Smells Like Teen Spirit. That's where I saw it, the debut on Headbangers Ball. Anyway, so Weezer comes out, the Sweater Song, which is just like them singing, and there's a bunch of dogs. And it's just like kind of this weird talky, there's like at a party, and you're like, oh man, whatever. And I didn't know what was happening. And I was like, I like whatever this is. And then the Buddy Holly comes out, and that was again a big video. Spike Jonze did the videos for those. Spike Jonze, the director, who's gone on to do. He started as a video director. He did Beastie Boy Sabotage. That's what music people probably know him most for, which is the greatest music video in the history of the world, period. End of discussion. But I love that. But I loved him. So it was like kind of Spike Jonze brought me in too, knowing he was directing these guys' music videos. Buddy Holly takes place inside of a Happy Days show. And it was like, these guys are pretty fun. And so I got them. And, back then we would just like dub. I was still listening to cassettes. CDs were a thing, but we were still mostly trading tapes. So I don't remember who it was. Somebody got it. I had it. And then the bass player in my band was going to go see Lush. Lush was a British Britpop band, and Weezer was going to open. And I really liked Lush, and Q was like, "Hey man, I've got tickets to go see Lush, and Weezer's open." I was like, "Cool." And so this was like towards the end of towards the end of my junior year. So the single was out, the full album was maybe out, but I couldn't. When you're a resident assistant, you have to do on call, and I couldn't get off being on call, so I didn't get to go. And I was like, and so I've never actually seen them live. I've seen videos of them live. So anyway, so I was there from the beginning. And then, 2 years later, when Pinkerton came out, I enjoyed Pinkerton. I wasn't one of the instant haters of Pinkerton. It was fine. But then they took 5 years until the next album, 4 or 5 years till the next album came out. So by the time the next album came out, Green, with the new band, I was now a young dad and everything. And then, so I kind of, during Green, Maladroit, and then those albums I was aware tangentially. And then by the time I got divorced from my first wife, Make Believe came out, and then I could catch back up. And then I've been there ever since. So that is my Weezer story. I've been with them from the beginning. There's a handful of bands that are like that. Them, Bare Naked Ladies. I bought their first album. I've actually seen them like 5 times. Nice. The Beastie Boys, there's just a handful. I saw them 3 times. There's a handful of bands I was there, like I got their first album and I've stayed with them the whole way. And obviously the Beastie Boys are no longer a band, obviously, because MCA is no longer with us. But so that's it. That's my Weezer story. Just there was something about them. Now, I haven't always worn glasses, and it just so happens that I wear the Rivers Cuomo glasses. But it's always like I always knew that when and if I needed glasses, I would wear these because I'm clumsy and the big chunky glasses are good for me. So it's always just weird. But it was like these nerdy guys, they wrote about stuff that was interesting. And when we get to my top songs on that first album, there's a song, and I'll just tell everybody, it's called In the Garage. And I was like, this is how I know this is my band.
I actually specifically, because we exchanged what our top 5s would be, because I wanted to make sure that there weren't any songs that I'd not listened to fully. And In the Garage was one of them, to be honest, because I'm going to upset a lot of people. I actively do not like the Blue Album. I think out of the 16 albums that we are tackling, so there's 16 Weezer albums. One of them is a covers album, which is Teal, which we're not touching in this.
But I do love, hands down, I think Teal's great. Yeah.
I'll clarify. Weezer, I did not realize how many covers they do. On every album they release, they seem to do a deluxe edition, and on almost all deluxes, they have covers. And I'm like, don't care about covers. And then I heard their cover of Unbreak My Heart, and I was like, this is fucking brilliant. I was like, it's so good. I like the original anyway, but the thing is, to me, is I never have covers convert me. I don't think I've... Because I describe myself kind of on the nose as genre fluid, and I think yourself is quite similar as well.
For sure,
if it's death metal, classical, I was listening to Vivaldi the other day, and obviously that connects with Weezer Seasons as well. Yeah. Listen to Vivaldi 1 minute, Slipknot the next, Sia the next, all kinds of
I know your
music.
Love for Sia.
I love Sia so
I know
much.
You do.
Her Christmas album is one of the best, I think, albums written, to be completely honest. The way you can write a Christmas album and it be that good, I don't understand how she does it. But no one else, once again, no one else listens to a Christmas album. People want to listen to the same 50 bloody songs every fucking year, and they don't want to listen to like 16 completely original, catchy, brilliant, sometimes heartfelt songs. And people are like, no, Sia, I don't like her. It's like, fuck off. I don't like Christmas music. Yeah, nor did I. Till I heard the Sia album. Sorry. I get very, very animated about Sia.
Yeah.
But regardless of all that sort of jazz, so with Weezer, with me, kind of, the way with covers, I was going to say, is that with covers, if I like the original song, if it's pop or whatever, then if there's a cover, I'll normally be like, oh, this is marginally better or worse, but it's the melody that means things to me more so. If there's a pop song and I really like it, and there's a metal-esque cover. As long as it's not over the top and going on tropes, or the song is pointless to cover, things like Seven Nation Army, it should be illegal to cover that song. It's pathetic.
Yeah, why bother?
Why?
Yeah.
It's like one of the most simple songs ever written, and it's brilliant, and it can stay that way. People have covered it on X Factor, all kinds of places. Don't. Why? What? You can't change enough about the song to make it your own. Whereas another band that do some great covers is Placebo. Placebo covered 20th Century Boy, which is a really cool, very similar to the original, but then they did Running Up That Hill, obviously the Kate Bush song, completely changed the sound of it. Their cover is one of the most depressing songs I've ever heard, and it's brilliant. It's so good. And they Pixies they cover, Where's My Mind, loads of cool stuff. So I like it when bands do get to do some covers. I think Marilyn Manson's music's mostly quite crap, but his covers are quite good, ignoring his personal recent politics. But and
him being a monster, beyond just being politics, just being an evil bastard.
Well, I've heard, I don't know much about it. That's why I kind of just I heard there was something with him and
Evan.
Yes, that's it. The one who plays Dolores in Westworld. Mm-hmm. And I heard she came out about something a while ago. But usually with that sort of stuff, I try not to consume it, not because I want to make these monsters okay in my mind, but I've done it before where I've gone delve deep into some controversies about someone, and then it turned out that stuff wasn't true, or part of it was and it wasn't, but then they still got their career back, and I'm just like, I can't.
Yeah, I hear you.
Generally, there's some people who are piece of shit, like Chris Brown can fuck off and hope he dies. Like, I don't give a shit about that person. He literally do not care. I would happily sign a petition to kill him. I hate him. But apart from him, there's really very few people I'm that vehemently angry about, and I don't want to be. I don't want to be a hateful person, so I try to avoid it. But what I was trying to say is that with myself interrupting myself like 4 times, is there's basically I've done a list of 16 Weezer albums because I've separated Pinkerton Deluxe with Pinkerton Standard. Because it's a very big difference for me of those bonus tracks. Then I was like, oh, that's the only one that really matters with Deluxe. And then I realised they've released a deluxe edition of every single album apart from their last 5 because, streaming.
They haven't stopped. Yeah, and they haven't stopped making albums. Right. Yeah.
So it's just everything has basically a deluxe edition, but I'm not tackling all the deluxe ones. Basically,
right, because the difference is the deluxe of everything else is here's some songs we've recorded that we didn't put on the album. Where it's like for hardcore fans, you're going to want this. Like the Gratitude one's only 4 songs. Deluxe is only 4 extra songs. So it's like I remember when I first got it, I was like, I something's wrong with my CD. Why is there only 4 songs? Like I didn't understand. But because it was a double disc, so you're getting a whole other disc. There should be more than 4 songs on. But like with Pinkerton, because a lot of the songs are redone, but there's like 5 or 6 different songs that were recorded, and it's weird to hear. And I didn't listen to it till you told me about it because again, like you, I was like, oh well, all the bonus ones are just bonus tracks. But this is because it's weird to hear Matt on it. You hear his voice a lot, and it's like, oh, from the Time Machine, Matt. That's him. You hear him singing and playing the original bassist. So it's really good. So yeah, I agree why Pinkerton is two separate albums, but for me, they kind of land in the same-ish place. So they're going to come up at the same time.
I'm only differentiating them because of my journey with Weezer. I've come in, I listened to their newer stuff, and I've gone back. Whereas obviously you started at the start, so we've gone in completely opposite directions.
Correct.
And so, which is why my reviews are probably going to upset a lot more people. But I've got some fun facts about various stuff, but we'll get onto that kind of as we kind of get there. We've kind of tackled the majority of things. So
should we talk about why fans are going to be mad at you, or do we not? Does that just come up organically?
Oh, it will come up. Okay. But I will say that it's probably good, as you see. I'll give a very brief idea, but I think you will have a better idea, which is basically because of this SNL sketch that I referenced, link in the description, make sure you watch it. It's brilliant. And
Leslie Jones didn't know who they were, by the way.
Really?
She just is that good.
Amazing.
She shows up. They wrote it. There's 3 nerd guys on Saturday Night Live. They wrote this sketch, and they did it, and Matt Damon was down. He was like, I can do this. I like Weezer.
He does look like he could be Weezer.
I know. And so Leslie Jones didn't know. She just was like, they're like, so that was all acting. She fucking nailed it. Oh, exactly so the controversy.
Good. I've literally
how do you guys say controversy?
Controversy. Some people say controversy, but I think
controversy. Yeah. Okay.
Controversy. Controversy. That's how I like to say it. Not controversy.
Controversy.
Controversy. What's a controv? Anyway, because I think control. I assume controversy comes from like control is the word. You can't control a controversy. I don't know if you go back in the words if that means anything. But in my mind, it's controversy. Where it not. I don't know where I was going with that. But
that's all good. Anyway.
The SNL sketch. They basically said. there's a whole thing with the Weezer fan base, which essentially the Blue album is held as the best album ever, apart from arguably Pinkerton. And then from there, most people don't really care about Weezer apart from the Green album. Because also, when we refer to albums in colours, it's because Weezer have, I think, 7 or 8 self-titled albums, and they just theme them differently from the covers. And so it's just now known as blue, white, black, teal. We'll go through them. But basically, yeah, Pinkerton and the Blue album are held in real high regard, and a lot of Weezer's other music is really not regarded very highly, even though they do constant headline tours, they sell out, they have currently at the moment got, and they haven't released an album for over a year yet, they've been releasing EPs, but generally albums get a lot more bigger listens or if there's anniversaries. They are currently on like 13 million Spotify listeners per month, that's just on Spotify, and that's a band that's been going for nearly 30 years, still releasing music, and they're still selling out shows, still big cultural importance, but no one seems to know who they are. It's such a paradox.
It is. It's weird. It's amazing.
No other band I've seen like that.
Yeah, and it is. And so that is what it is so people feel like. So when with the Green album, so what happens is Matt leaves because there was like a 4-year, like I mentioned, there was this break, and so Matt, the original bassist, leaves for lots of reasons, and we're not going to get into there. We don't know them. This is all conjecture, but we do know that Mikey Day comes, and Mikey was in Rivers' other band that he made. So Rivers is 53 years old. So when this album came out, he was well into his 20s, but he finally got into Harvard, which was kind of a dream of his. So even though he's not a traditional college-age guy, he goes to Harvard. So the band kind of gets put on hold after Pinkerton, and he makes this other band because, of course, he can't stop making music because he's clearly spectrum-y, and he can't help himself. And so anyway, so Mikey Day comes on to be the new bassist because he's a friend of his from this other band, but he has severe mental issues and addiction issues. And so his anxiety prevented him from touring because like they weren't expecting the Green album to do anything, but it's like Pinkerton had this cult following for the 4 years while they weren't making music, and Brian started his own band and Pat started his own band, and they're both talented musicians, and they're just like, okay, Weezer's over. We made these 2 great albums, whatever. So Mikey comes in, and so I think people accept him as the new bass player because he was in Rivers' other band and he totally gets Rivers, this whole thing. And then he leaves for all of those reasons. So then when Scott comes in, and Scott doesn't look like he belongs in Weezer. Scott's like Scott's a Marine. Scott's a dude. You know what I mean? Like, he's built like a dude. And
he doesn't look like a nerd, which Weezer's... Right. Nothing against Weezer or nerds, because we are nerds and we love nerds. But, like, you look at me and I go, I love Star Wars. People don't go, no. You like Star Wars. And if you say to people, I'm an author, people don't go, you, an author? I thought you were like a... I thought you were some sort of crazy, skydiver or something. So, no, you do fit the criteria that stereotyping authors. So do Weezer for nerds.
Right. And so because Scott is, like, a foot taller than everybody, and he's built like a brick shit house and was literally in the military, and he's got this big presence, and his voice is different than Mikey and Matt's, and his bass playing is different which we'll talk about. So when he came in, I think people didn't like that. They didn't accept him. And so there's this break from Maladroit on that people are saying, well, that's garbage music. And it's like, but 3/4 of the band is the same. Brian, who's an amazing guitarist, didn't join Weezer until right before Blue came out. He's not even doing all the music on the album. Like the other guitarist did some of it. Brian finished it. But it's like, so this happens to bands, right? I mean, the Beatles, Pete Best was the first drummer, right? Stu Sutcliffe was the original. The Beatles used to have 5 guys in it, and everybody's okay with that for some reason. And when Ronnie Wood comes in, when Brian Jones died, everybody wasn't like, fuck the Rolling Stones, you fucking piece of shit, worst band ever. You're
Metallica,
like,
bassist of Metallica, Richard Burton, was it, or Cliff Burton? He was like Cliff, that was it. Richard Burton's the actor. Cliff Burton, he died in that tragic bus accident, and that was in the kind of pinnacle of Metallica. And then they continue with the chap whose name escapes me, Dom or something. And I've seen them live, so I know who this guy is. He's been with them longer than literally anyone now, because he's basically been there for like decades now. Yeah. But no one goes Metallica. Oh, yeah, Metallica died after Cliff died. No one says that.
But it's for some reason with this, there's something about Matt that everybody... And again, I'm not saying he was a bad bass player or whatever. So I don't know what it is other than I am the Matt Damon character in the sketch where the thing that I love about Weezer, and again, I mentioned Bare Naked Ladies and Fountains of Wayne were another band that kind of are in the same... they broke up and the guy died and everything, but there's these bands that grow and change. And I think, and again, going back to the Beatles, like they were only banned for 7 years, but like the difference between Love Love Me Do and like Revolution #9 on the White Album, or like when you get to the very last album, Abbey Road was the last album they recorded. Even though Let It Be was less, there's like, you can't tell me she came in through the bathroom window and I saw her standing there. We wouldn't think that's even the same band, and that's okay. But for whatever reason, the Leslie people from the Weezer sketch say they died in 1996. Their band ended, and everything after that, it's like fake. And I don't understand it. Like, of course they're different. And this is the one thing that'll be fun through this conversation, because you're coming in reverse order and seeing where they came from. And I was there watching them evolve, growing up with them. Like, we're all Gen Xers, me and the guys from Weezer, and we all are in our, either in our 50s or almost 50. And so I think there's nothing wrong with growing and changing. I mean, do you want to do the same? Because if they put out another album that was exactly the Blue album, everyone would be like, oh, lame, it's just another Blue album. Mm-hmm. But you're like, oh, but I'm going to give you Gratitude, and you're like, that sucks. But what it's the weird. Fuck, man? What do you want? And it is weird. They're the only band. Nobody looks at, again, Rolling Stone Sticky Fingers and is like, that album sucks. That album's fucking awesome. Or like Tattoo You, which came out, the one that has Start Me Up on it. Like, nobody's like, oh, when the Stones got to the 80s, lame. No, they're still fucking putting out hits, and they're still making really good music. And so nobody looks at 1966 Rolling Stones and 1982 Rolling Stones and is like, well, they're bad now. Why? They're different. There's no way they would have written that song in 1964.
People change. But that's the thing.
Right,
it's just bands consist of people. People change. I literally here's an example that some people might find shocking. When I first watched Star Wars Revenge of the Sith at the cinema, I didn't like it. Okay? I watched it like a year or so later when it came out on home release, which, back for any young listeners, that's how long you had to usually wait. It was
full year.
6 months, if you're lucky, normally a year till a film comes out on home release, normally longer to actually afford it. Whereas now it's
like, they were like $90
in the cinema
when they first came out. Yeah.
Whereas now it's like, oh, it's in the cinema, and also it's streaming if you want it as well. It's like Disney Plus is like, you can watch it in the cinema or at home, and it's like, why would I go out?
But I can just sit at home. Yeah.
But it's one of those things, and I even say that's like a very minor, short space of time. It's even just like, if anyone looks at themselves and looks at the music they liked as not just the music they liked as a teenager, but like the music that struck a chord with them as a teenager compared to the music that struck a chord with them in their 30s or 40s, or movies that you like, or food that you like, or people that you like, or things you like to do. I'm much more introverted than I was 10 years ago. If I write music, which I can't, but if I wrote music, my music now would be very different to how it was 10 years ago.
Of course.
I want bands to change. Bring Me the Horizon is probably... Bring Me the Horizon and Eminem are two bands that I think, to a degree, get Weezer syndrome. Nowhere near as bad, but because both of them, for different reasons, are such mammoth, genre-changing bands. And Weezer are, in a lot of ways, are that, but they're just not really recognised as it by a lot of people.
Because of their audience.
Yeah, whereas Eminem's like the biggest rapper ever, and also Bring Me the Horizon in the alternative scene is the biggest alternative band of the last, who started in the last 20 years. You move away from Slipknot, Iron Maiden, Metallica, Kiss, bands like that. So what modern bands do you have? You've got Slipknot, who started in 98, whose album was 99. And then Architects, I guess, or System of a Down, who's at the same sort of time. No one else has really released an album, their first album in the 2000s, and is this massive band, apart from Bring Me. Bring Me released albums, they got really, 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 really heavy, and then they slowly got less heavy. They made an album that everyone in the metal scene considered perfect. They made another album that everyone considered near perfect. They made another album that's a bit more poppy, that I love and have on vinyl over there.
Nice.
That everyone fucking hated, apart from me and my mate Reese, who's been on Jenna and Chit-Chat many times. I love that album.
First guest, Reese.
Yeah, first and 100th.
I'm assuming that he's got a plaque at his house in Wales. It says first and 100. Reese.
No, unfortunately not. Maybe one day. Maybe
one day we'll get that for him. Yeah.
I have got something that a friend of mine made me because I helped them start a podcast. I do have Podcast Mentor.
Nice.
So a friend of mine made me a nice little trophy, which is cool. But yeah, me and my friend Reese, we're the only ones who seem to really like that album by Bring Me the Horizon. It's called Ammo, and I love it. It's got like Grimes on it and all kinds of weird things on it. And then they released an album afterwards around COVID, and it goes back to their original. And everyone's like, oh yeah, Bring Me's back. And I'm like, A, I love that album, but B, I'd rather have a band that change and do weird different things constantly. And yeah, maybe only 1 in 3 albums is a hit, but at least you get a hit, rather than going, I call it Kill Switch Engage syndrome, because there's a band called Kill Switch Engage that are brilliant, but every album they release is basically the same. The only difference you could tell is they change singers. So so they've got Howard Jones, who's got an incredible voice, and they've got
Howard Jones.
It's not
the pop singer Howard Jones.
No, it's a different Howard Jones. No,
so remember, I'm old. Don't I know.
Start
throwing Howard Jones at me.
I know. I thought, as I said Howard Jones, I was like, I bet it's going to click. No, it's not that Howard Jones. It's a different gentleman. But he's got an amazing voice. But he's got 4 albums with them. If you listen to the first album he made with them and the fourth, they sound a bit different. But if you listen album to album, any song could almost be on any album, and every song sounds basically the same. And I go, if you love Kill Switch Engage, that's great, because you've just got 4 albums that everything sounds great. But if you want any variation of music, you listen to one song, you go, oh, this is amazing. This is like their best track, their big single. And then listen to the album, you go, this is just the same as the single, but slightly worse. Now, I like Kill Switch, to clarify, but I want bands to take risks. Same with movies. I'd rather a movie tries and fails than is just this bland average. And that's what I feel about music. I like experimental music. I like weird different things. Yeah, put classical music with death metal to it. Try it. See where it goes. Has someone done it before? Probably. But see if you can mix it together. If everyone does the same shit, then all the music would be Ed Sheeran. And I don't mind Ed Sheeran, but I describe him as the I describe him as the chicken korma of music. He's the blandest curry dish everyone generally likes. But if your favourite curry or favourite sort of Indian style food, even though korma is not an Indian dish, but ignoring that, if your favourite curry is a korma, you don't really like curry that much. Now, if Ed Sheeran's your favourite artist, that's fine. But if you love Ed Sheeran more than any other artist in the world, I can probably, and this is me being kind of a dick, I can probably bet that if Ed Sheeran's your number one artist, you probably don't actually like a wide variety of genres. That's not to say to downplay anyone likes Ed Sheeran. I like Ed Sheeran.
But you probably don't even like all of Ed Sheeran's music then, because he loves rap. Like he raps on every album. I think his rapping is awful. That's the thing. I think his rapping is atrocious. Now I know a lot of people like it, and that's fine. I'm not a gatekeeper with music, and I'm not trying to make anyone who likes Ed Sheeran feel bad. But it's that kind of comparison. It's same. Sure. Any band that's like in the charts constantly or is known as one of the biggest bands in the entire world, if they are your absolute top favorite band and you have no other bands that even close to compare, most of the time it's because you listen to music that's primarily in the charts and stuff, and there's not a problem with that. But few people who think Ed Sheeran is the best artist in the world, most of them probably haven't listened to a lot of other singer-songwriters who were there before him, probably. Yeah, that's kind of, I sound like a dick saying it. No, but I also think too, there's again, there's nothing wrong if you're just a radio listener or you're just a whatever your thing, whatever your service tells you to listen to or whatever, and you listen to that and you like that and the algorithms tell that's fine. That's awesome, because you're getting a wide variety, and every once in a while you get like a gem, right? Like we don't stream the way that you do. We don't Spotify, but like we use iHeartRadio because it's still radio. So like the artists get paid a little bit, and you don't get to pick. It's just like you pick a station and it'll be like Sarah Bareilles Radio. Sarah Bareilles, by the way, did a guest spot on Jimmy Kimmel Live. As if you're wondering if you want you to, she sang it as a duet.
Oh,
you
amazing.
can watch that on YouTube. It's amazing. You can tell she was having the most fun. But like, so you like, we both love Sarah Bareilles, singer songwriter. So pianist. So we'll click a Sarah Bareilles Radio, and you'll get like, oh, here's somebody I've never heard of. And so we picked up a couple of artists because the algorithm is like, well, if you like Sarah Bareilles Radio, check out this person, Alice Merton, like her, or Jax, or whomever, So
Megan's really been into Jax recently. She's got some really amazing music. Some of her older stuff is incredible. I know. Love it.
And that was it. We just stumbled across it that way. So that is okay. And if that's the only thing you only like, that one Jax song, that's okay too. There's nothing wrong. Mike isn't saying there's anything wrong with liking all of Ed Sheeran's hits, because Ed Sheeran's hits, there's a fucking ton of them. There's a fuck ton of them, and they're all really good.
It's hard not to like all Ed. I'd say you can almost not listen to all of Ed Sheeran's albums and not like a single song. If you do, you're either an insane and musical elitist, or you're the fussiest person in the world, or you're just lying.
Correct. Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, I want to be cool and say I don't like Ed Sheeran, which is fine. You can do that. But I think what it is, even people who he's their favorite artist, or Taylor Swift is they haven't listened to the rest of the albums, like the deeper cuts. Like when you're that big, like one of my all-time favorite bands, who again I was there from the beginning, Duran Duran. It's not like I founded Duran Duran, but you know, like I was there. They were my first concert, and I was there when they first came out. In the late 70s, early 80s. Like I was there for that first album. Because we knew people from the UK, so they actually even had the original Duran Duran first album that didn't have "Is There Something I Should Know" on it, like the original UK release and everything. Wow. So because that's how we discovered them. These British friends we had. My mom was friends with their mom, and so we just kind of.
They the ones used to give you our cherry chocolate oranges as well.
That's them. Yep, those are them. Yep, the males were their last name. So they so that's how we heard of Duran Duran. Like just so, but I was always a big big fan of them, but like the deeper cuts on their albums, most people, like you could go to a Duran Duran show and you'd be like, I've never heard anything other than a hit. And there's going to be 25 songs, But then you're like, what is this weird thing? Is he playing the flute? What the fuck is that? And you're like, oh yeah, that's like, the deep cut, right? And that is true. That happens. Or like, there's a sitar on Love Is the Answer. And it's like, but remember, everyone's like, what the fuck? Why is there a sitar in this? Well, the fucking Beatles did it first, right? The Beatles brought sitars to pop music. George Harrison did. So it's been done before, but that didn't get released as a single.
No.
I'm sure the first time somebody heard on Revolver, George playing a sitar, everybody's like, did I have a stroke? What's going on?
I felt like that when I heard Love Is the Answer.
Yeah, I love Love Is the Answer, by the way.
I do not. I am not a fan. But I appreciate them doing something different. Even the Beatles did it first, but Beatles done everything first. But
of course. But you know what I mean? That's the point. It's like, so again, there's nothing. If Ed Sheeran's your favorite artist, that's totally awesome. But if you only know the hit songs, it's like you'll be shocked when you're like hearing some of his deeper cuts, or the one album that has all that, the one when his grandma died and he made all the Irish music and at the back end of the album. I think that was Divide. And you're like, oh, or, it's like, what the fuck? All these Irish songs. You're like, well, he was feeling it, so it's like he can do whatever he wants. He's the biggest artist in the world. So he doesn't get the shit though, like Weezer does. And maybe it's because he always knows how to put out a hit where he's like, and that could be, and maybe that's what we'll learn, is that there's a secret to picking the singles. As opposed to the deep cut where Weezer doesn't really do singles. Like they release them as singles. Like, one of my songs that we'll get to, Thank God for Girls, was released as a single. First, it was just released just as a song before the White Album came out. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I love this song. It was like Weezer just put out a single. That's what they're going to start doing now. They're like, nah, psych, we're still putting out an album. We made you buy it twice, sucker, because I buy music. So that's what happened. I bought Thank God for Girls as a single, and then it was like 6 months later, it was on the White Album. But that's just to think. So I just think there's something about like they have their own sensibility too. And so that's part of it too. I remember when the big flap came out about Raditude came out and people really shit on Raditude. There was a petition. People were trying to pay the record company to never print it again. And Pat said, well, if you want to raise $20 million, we'll split that 4 ways and we'll break up.
Wow.
He's like, if you want to raise $20 million, you give us, it's obviously, because it's like, the 10 rabid fans who are screaming, yelling. So I think that's part of it too. And it's almost like people have been shamed into pretending they don't like Weezer because there's these rabid, like we keep saying Leslie, who doesn't care, but Leslie in the clip, the Leslie Jones characters who are like, there's only 2 good, I'll maybe give you green. Like they're like the squeak you out, just like everything in our society. It's so polarized. So it's like, if you're like, oh man, I love Raditude. Like you said, people are going to come at you with pitchforks, but you're like, but calm the fuck down. It's just music.
Well, that's it. I mean, music's a weird one. Me and Jack had this conversation a while ago when he first came on Genuine Chit-Chat and we spoke about movies and stuff. We touched on it a little bit and saying it's really weird because if you critique someone's movie taste without being insulting, people don't get as offended. I might, because I hold movies I enjoy very dear to my heart, but I'm not going to be offended if someone said Star Wars Phantom Menace is crap. Don't get me wrong, because it's not the best made movie. But if you said, because you like Star Wars The Phantom Menace, I don't listen to your opinions on movies, that would offend me. That's what I'm kind of getting at. Music's a whole different kettle of fish. You insult an album someone likes, people take that personally because people connect more. I think there's certain movies that are exceptions, but the majority of the time people connect with albums in vastly different ways. A lot of the time people go through hard times, albums connect with them, things like that. But it's funny with Weezer because we'll get into the album, we'll get into album rankings, so we can kind of talk about the albums as a whole.
Sure.
But it's weird you say about singles because on my top 5 list, I've written if they are singles, what number single they were. And it's like Seasons, they released 4 EPs this year. Apparently, according to Wikipedia, they've only got 1 single out for 4 EPs, which is an hour and a half of music. However,
A Little Bit of Love was the only one.
Yeah, but they do have 3. They have a lyric video for every EP, but they also have a video to Dark Enough to See the Stars, which I love, and also they've got another song as well with a video. So I'm like, what defines as a single if you've got an hour and a half of music, where every Weezer album is about 30 minutes, you've got 2 music videos out, 3 lyric videos, but none of them seem to be the single. I don't know what constitutes a single anymore. I think it's a bit muddy because of Spotify.
Yeah, I agree.
But also with Pinkerton, one thing to note with Weezer as well, because I went down a big Weezer rabbit hole, massive a preparation for this.
Megan is super excited we're recording this.
Yeah, so I can stop chatting about Weezer and stop playing constant Weezer for the last 6 months.
But you won't stop.
Probably not. I've actually really gone into them now, and now I know I like every album. Like, I want to clarify that to all listeners. I enjoy every single album. I think one album is way worse than all of them, and then I think a second album is almost as bad, and then the rest of them I think are all pretty close.
But the thing is, it's not, you're comparing, because you're again comparing it to other Weezer albums. Like,
exactly.
Their worst album is still better than a lot of other albums. So we're going to rank them. Yeah,
is better than worst albums of bands I love more. Like, there's bands I like more than Weezer, but they've released albums worse. But it's one thing with Pinkerton, because Pinkerton is the big crux of Weezer. It's a really weird thing. We could have an entire podcast talking just about Pinkerton, because it's insane amount of almost lore behind it. You know, you said he went to Harvard. He went to Harvard to study classic composition. He's one of those guys, Rivers Cuomo. Also, with people saying that, you know, people joining the band, it messed up their sound. Rivers writes almost all of their music. He writes so much music. He's not only got his Weezer and his side band, and the Cuomo home tapes, which are just random stuff he makes, sometimes become songs, sometimes don't. He's got like 3 huge albums
called Alone.
Alone. And it's like, okay, you've got all this stuff and everything else he does, and songs he's co-written, and songs he's featured on, and blah, blah. He just wants to get music out. But he released Pinkerton, and then Pinkerton was voted by the Rolling Stone listeners as the 3rd worst album of 1996. So Pinkerton got slated. No one seemed to like it. Weezer basically all hid, you know, in different ways. Rivers obviously went to Harvard and studied classic composition, and then he had to have a surgery to make his one of his legs longer because he has a shorter leg than the other. I don't know why I need to describe that. That was a really weird thing. But he did that, and then when he was in that state, I think that's when he wrote a lot of Pinkerton, I think. Because
he was in a lot of pain.
He was in a lot of pain, he was isolated, all this stuff. But he was actually writing a rock opera called Songs from a Black Hole, and then he had pieces of it together, and then they just kind of dropped it, but a lot of it got used to make Pinkerton. So Pinkerton is this weird Frankenstein release where it's like,
and they're
especially
not
when you hear
all
the deluxe
even
edition
together. Yeah,
no.
They're not even together. Correct.
No.
Yeah,
it's such a weird album in itself, especially when you get the deluxe stuff and you realize this is kind of the uncut version of the album, and it's a mess in a good way. But you've got like the normal album, they're like 2 or 3 bonus tracks. Then you've got like a live song, a bonus track, 3 live songs, 2 bonus tracks, then like 3 more live songs, 2 alternate versions, then 2 more tracks that I think are the best tracks on the whole album, then 6 live tracks at end, and you're like, what? Who put this together? It seems like someone just got all the songs together as like marbles and just went, eh. And it was like, that's where they land, and it's like, yeah, what's happening?
Yeah, because they're not in any particular order.
No, they're just almost literally thrown on there. But Pinkerton, yeah, as it was voted the worst. So this is one of my little things. It was voted the 3rd worst album of 1996. Now that is a very harsh thing to do. Then, since then, it was a couple years after it came out. You know, Weezer obviously hid away because everyone basically hated their really passionate album and stuff. And then since then, it's been named as one of the greatest albums of all time, which I do not agree with, to clarify. I don't think it's Weezer's best album, let alone one of the best albums of all time. But since then, it obviously got done that. Then in 2010, so about 14 years later, that's when the special edition got released, because that's when they were confident enough that people weren't going to shit all over their music again, it seems. And it's just... I would love to have heard that rock opera. If I had a genie and loads of random wishes, aside from wishing, you know, health for myself and all kinds of selfish wishes, if I had like 5 wishes I could just keep for me, and then I had like 10 random kind of small wishes, one of them would be, I wish Weezer could now just suddenly decide to create that rock opera. Could you imagine how good it would be? They could, and they should, and I want them to.
Because the fact that they did seasons. So like, this was something they kind of always joked about, doing seasons, which was one album that came out on the equinox each year based on Vivaldi. And it was just some joke that they did. Because as you said, he studied classical music. They're all amazing musicians. 100%. There was a stretch there during the Hurley tour where Pat Rivers wasn't playing guitar at all. Pat was playing guitar. Brian was playing lead. Pat was playing rhythm guitar up front, and they had a different drummer. So like you can see in that video, the one with Sarah Bareilles singing, I Wonder If You Want Me To. So there was a couple of albums where Rivers wasn't playing guitar on stage. And he was trying to like be more not like himself. You know, he's pushing himself. Like he's painfully introverted and all these things. He's trying to like be more of a front man. And he did that for a couple of albums. It's what it is. I mean, Pat's still on the record playing, obviously, but it was just because Pat's that's the point, is he's that talented. So they could do it. They could pull off a rock, because Brian's voice is amazing.
Yeah, and just to clarify,
and so you could do if you wrote a rock opera, he could hand it off because he's got the other. I mean, Scott's voice is okay, but Pat and Brian's voices are excellent, so he could easily write parts for them.
Well, I think what they would do probably is a rock opera. I'd love to see a Weezer rock opera, but I imagine they do similar to what Book of Mormon did, or the guys Matt and Trey Parker, which is kind of just write it and then give it to someone else. Because although I think Rivers,
just turn it as a play, sure.
Because like they've done that with quite a few things. Like Green Day, American Idiot was one of them, which I haven't seen. But there's lots of like biopic-esque things. I watched the Jersey Boys, Frankie Valli. Amazing, really cool show. I would love to see either something like that, or more so, I just want Weezer to create an original rock opera. I would love them to create it with all of them singing and stuff on it, and a bit more raw. Create some sort of crazy movie with it, and then that get adapted into a stage play.
A stage show.
I would pay
not with different
so
actors,
much money, much money for that to happen. But we have to get to the rankings.
Let's go. Yes, boy, we're 45 minutes in. We're finally getting started.
Straight into it. Right. So for me, there's 16, but for you, there's 15. So the worst album I think Weezer have, and once again, I think it's still an alright album, but I think their worst album is Pacific Daydream, because it's the only album, and the way I kind of, especially the middle albums, it gets very hard. I've literally changed the order twice today of what the albums are. So there's about 10 or probably 8-ish albums, which are all pretty damn even, and I think it just depends on the day.
That's exactly what I was going to say when I get to mine. If you ask me tomorrow, these middle ones may change.
Yeah, the top, I think, 5 are probably the top 6, I think, are fairly unchangeable, and then the last 3, I think, last 3, maybe 4, but then all the ones in between are just kind of how I feel in the day. But the reason I think, the way I kind of started this list and the way I kind of first did it was because obviously I listen to things on Spotify, and it's, especially with Weezer's back catalogue, it saves me a fucking fortune. But I went through there, and I basically just, anytime I heard a song that clicked with me as a song, I hit like. And then basically Spotify does the thing where you can click on an artist, click on their like songs, and it just shows you per album just the songs you've liked. So I could just easily skim up and down. I go, okay,
look at you using technology to help.
I know, but you'd be surprised, because the middle 8 albums all have between 4, 5, and really 4 or 5 tracks I loved. And the rest of the album I think is good. So it's so hard to be like, okay, I've got 3 albums which have all got 11 songs. They're all half an hour long, and I like 4 songs of them. And I think 2 of the 4 songs are incredible evenly across them. So it's a mess. But Pacific Daydream, I only liked 1 song. And even then, I barely remember it. And every time I listened to the album, it felt like I hadn't listened to anything. I'd finish it, and the music would stop, and I go, oh, okay. So I just play it again. I go, oh, I wasn't listening properly. And I felt like I just kept zoning out whenever I listened to Pacific Daydream. And actually,
it Feels Like Summer? Is that the one you like?
Let me take a look. Because I also found that when I got into Weezer, because I got into them through the White Album. So I heard the single Do You Want to Get High, which I think is phenomenal as a song. And I was like, this is Weezer? I remember Buddy Holly, a song that I fucking hate. I was like, just because I hate Buddy Holly, because it plays on the radio so goddamn frequently. On like certain rock stations are like, we love Weezer, we love Buddy Holly, and Islands in the Sun. It's like, do you have anything else? Oh yeah, Your Name is Jonas. It's like, okay, can you play anything that isn't from their first 3 albums at all? No, is the answer to that question. So I'm just fucking sick of hearing it. But Pacific Daydream, the one song that I liked. I'm literally on Spotify. It's recent, and all 6 recent things are Weezer albums. Because I keep going, no, this album's the 15th one.
I know, it's crazy.
I'm trying to get to low, but my Wi-Fi is being terrible. But with you, what do you think of Pacific Daydream? Like how?
No, it's last for me too.
Is it? Oh, that's interesting. What makes it last for you? Have interest?
Well, because I love the Beach Boys. Because Brian Wilson is Rivers. They're the same guy. They're these musical geniuses who are on the spectrum, who are painfully shy, who can't stop writing music, who I think are historically misunderstood. Like Brian Wilson is a genius. And I know this is like hyperbolic, but like they made a movie about him because, I mean, he was in the Beach Boys or whatever. And the movie was great with Paul Dano and John Cusack. It's amazing. But I won't be surprised if in 30 years they make the Rivers Cuomo biopic, because like Prince too, they'll eventually make a Prince biopic. Like Prince, also on the spectrum, also an amazing musician. So there's something about, so I think I love Beach Boys. That's my favorite song on Pacific Daydream. And it's this is Brian's favorite album, which is super weird. Brian loves this. album. Brian from the band.
Yeah, because Brian, for clarity for anyone listening, is Rivers Cuomo is the vocalist / guitarist, keyboardist, main songwriter. You've got Patrick Wilson, who's the drummer, and I think he does quite a lot of backing vocals.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you've got Scott Schreiner, who's the bassist, and also does keyboards occasionally. And then you've got Brian Bell, who is the guitarist. They all sometimes do keyboards and all some degree do backing vocals, but I think Red has somewhat tainted what because like they all do backing vocals. It's like, well, I think one album they all did vocals. I don't know if they all always do it, but
Brian's got the best harmonizing voice.
Yes,
and you hear that on Raditude. And so Brian's got several side project bands, and his voice is smooth, man. And on Teal, he does Paranoid, and he sounds just like Ozzy. It's crazy. He's bananas. Anyway, so the reason Pacific Daydream, it's uneven, and you can tell these were actually songs that were going to be on Black, and he just kept putting them aside. It's like, this doesn't feel so. It feels like a hodgepodge. I really love Beach Boys. Feels Like Summer's fine. And that's just it. So it's like there's two songs, and the other songs again are fine songs. Like if I were starting a band and I wrote, Get Right, I'd be like, God damn, I wrote that song. But it's not. It's compared to their other works. That's what makes it. It was a cast-off album, unlike one of my top ranked albums. Was also a cast-off album, but because it was done over years, where Pacific Daydream was kind of done on a whim. They were supposed to do Black, and then Rivers was like, listen to these, and Brian was like, let's do that.
I see.
Because he sent them to Brian and is like, I'm not sure what these are, and Brian was like, I love this.
The song I like from Pacific Daydream is actually Sweet Mary, but I can't even remember how it goes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I just heard it, and I was like, and I was like, maybe, because occasionally with a couple of these albums, I was like, Red took me a couple of listens, but I gave it a bit of extra go because I know how much you like it. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to keep giving it a go. And then, sometimes I find with albums a lot of the time, which is why I get offended when I recommend people albums and they don't finish the album, because I'm like, I listen to an album, if someone recommends it to me, unless it's literal, borderline unlistenable. I tried listening to Megan Thee Stallion's newest album after going, she was quite fun in She-Hulk. No, her album is absolutely atrocious, and it's as bad as I thought it would be, unfortunately. I'm not into that. No problem with anyone else who likes her music. I can't stand it was her latest album.
Totally fair. Yeah.
But I listened to that once, and I was like, I never need to listen to that again. With most other music, I try to listen to an album at least twice. There's one to get the vibe, and again to get individual songs. And normally a third time I find really helps. And I found that with Pacific Daydream, I listened to about 7 times, and nothing. I was just like,
totally fair.
Once that one song, I was like, oh, maybe this is it. Now it's clicked to this one song. And then we listened to the album, and I was like, oh no, I quite like this one. What's this one? Oh, it's the song I already liked. And then then the thing would end, and I was like, yeah, it's pretty weak.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that came out in 2017. So that's one of their newest ones. That's in the new age of Weezer.
Yeah.
What is your second lowest one?
Well, I honestly thought it was going to be Hurley, but it turns out it's Black.
Funnily enough, Black is my third lowest.
It's Hurley and Black are the bottom 3.
I put Hurley quite a bit higher, so I won't spoil. Hurley initially, when we first talked about doing this, I said to you, I think Hurley's probably their worst album.
Yeah,
I couldn't even get through it. I listened to 4 songs, and I was like, no. Both Hurley and Pacific Daydream are 2 albums that when I've been going back listening to Weezer, I hit them, and then I stop, and I get put off for it. But after a few listens, and especially because the deluxe one, Hurley is pushing me.
And I even said to you yesterday, I was like, as I was listening back to Hurley today, I'm like, do I like Hurley better than this one? And the thing is about it, so with Hurley and Black, they're both kind of bottom, they're the other 2 of the bottom. So I've kind of ranked them. I was going to do 4 tiers, but you did 3 tiers, so I'm going to go with the 3 tiers. So these are for hardcore fans only. I own them. As soon as a new Weezer album comes out, I buy it that day. So it's not like I don't. I think what it is about Hurley is because its partner album, Death to False Metal, is so much better.
Yes.
And that hurts it. I know it's not fair, but you can only compare it to itself. I mean, that's what you always do. That's what we've been doing this whole time, is you compare it to itself. And I know that's what the hardcore, first 2 only people are comparing. And I'm with you. I disagree. Those 2 are not going to make my top 5. But I feel like Black Can't Knock the Hustle is an amazing single, and I know people shit all over it, and there's total cultural appropriation with that opening riff.
They don't like Can't... I think Can't Knock the Hustle, legit, that's in my top 10 songs of Weezer.
Mine too.
That song itself, Can't Knock the Hustle, I heard that, I was like, this is going to be my new favourite Weezer album, and I was like, oh, there's one song on this album I like apart from that, and it's Piece of Cake, and that's it. The rest of the album I think is really good. Vaguely trash. I'll clarify again.
Weezer version
last time
trash.
I say, whenever we shit on these albums, it's Weezer's trash, which is still solid.
So, exactly. No, it's the same. I feel the same way. So that's it. I actually like Zombie Bastards too. Piece of Cake. I like Die Die Is Not just because I just think it's funny.
To be fair, that was a song that I did keep hearing, and every time I heard it, I was like, I dislike it a little bit less each time. I like it's kind of fun and stupid in a good way.
I think it's exactly, he knew what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's a soundtrack. Like maybe he was watching his kids. Like I can almost see him, like he walked in and his kids were like playing video games and he started making this song. Like, because as a guy who loves Tom Bombadil and who like loves this songiness, like people shit on Tom Bombadil and they're like, I'm glad he wasn't in the fucking movies, but I love Tom Bombadil and everything is a song and he's singing his life. And so I feel like Zombie Bastards is a Tom Bombadil song. Like I just picture Rivers walks in, his kids are playing a game, and he's standing in front of the screen. Da, da. That's how I see it. I could be totally wrong. So
I completely agree. Oh, him doing like virtual reality, playing like a Call of Duty zombies.
Yeah.
And he was just like, die, die, you zombie. And you're like, that's quite a good song. And they just made a song from it.
Yeah. And then the next one is Hurley. So again, at first I thought Hurley would be last, but upon this, so I'm going to put Hurley in at third to last. And again, okay. Trainwrecks is awesome. And I know people shit on Trainwrecks. I think that's a great song. And Smart Girls, I sing Smart Girls. It's like, again, you're reaching into my soul and you're saying, who are you into? Smart Girls. I love that song. I love the things that it represents. And so I just feel like Hang On is pretty solid. Obviously the main track, Memories, was the single, is good. Where's My Sex? I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, I don't like this song. But I think the more I've heard it, I'm like, oh,
I'm the same
really
with that.
Clever. It's really clever.
I'm the same with Where's My Sex. For me, Hurley, I actually quite like 6 songs on Hurley.
Oh, okay. So for me, it's way higher.
Yeah, but the thing is, Hurley's got a little asterisk behind it because it's the deluxe edition has got the song Represent. And it was a single that was released for football, or for the people who are wrong in this world, soccer. Rivers Cuomo got really into American world football, American soccer, and he wrote a song called Represent, and it's really cool. It's off as his own single. It's really, really good. And then they released a slightly more rocky version, which basically just had some like no soccer sounds on it, basically, of people cheering and stuff, and then a little bit more of a guitar-y mix. That song, it was very close to landing in my top 5. That song itself, for me, elevates Hurley above what it probably deserves. If you take that one song out, which isn't even a song that's released with Hurley, hence why I'm a little bit like, album ranking is going to upset people. Well, that's it, and that's how I've heard it, because on Spotify, they just lump a lot of stuff together. Like, Memories is pretty good. I like Ruling Me. I really like Unspoken. Where's My Sex I grew into.
Me too,
then I really like Brave New World. But Represent for me is like the pinnacle. But I find that Hurley's quite fillery, I found. Even though it's quite high in my rankings, I just think it is... I wouldn't recommend Hurley to anyone who's like a... If I'm saying I want to get you into Weezer, I'm not going to recommend Hurley. Like that's...
I wouldn't either. Nope.
No. So for me, the bottom 3... So the worst for me is Pacific Daydream. The third worst for me is the Black Album. The second worst album for me is the Blue Album. So their first
I thought
album...
that's where you were going to say.
And that's why it's going to offend a lot of people. So it's their first album that came out. I think, before I heard Pacific Daydream, I legitimately thought it was the worst. Before I started this Weezer discussion, before I gave it a proper listen without just being, conflating myself, I was like, the album's actively bad. I used to genuinely think, I was like, the album's crap. I was like, I don't get Weezer, the album's not good. Because I've listened to the album in my youth before, because Weezer are such a big band in the alternative scene. People always go on about them. And I never gave Pinkerton a go, but I listened to, My Name is Jonas, that's all right. Say It Ain't So, I think is okay. Buddy Holly, I think, is actually quite a boring, crap song, but it's tainted because I've heard it so many goddamn times. And it doesn't, for me, have enough of a hook. However, Undone's good fun. I like that. It's not amazing for me, personally. I just think it was like, it's a pretty good song. Once again, if an unknown band released that as their first track, I'd be like, fair
Which they
play.
did.
Exactly. That's the crux of it, is that because I started Weezer with the White Album and Do You Want to Get High, and I've been going back and I've listened to a lot of their great stuff, it has tainted it for me. But I think their best song on the album is the last song, Only in Dreams. I think that outro, it's so simple, but it's so good. And I just think that one song, for me, really saves it. Because
it's a really good song.
It's so good. And the more I listen to the Blue Album, the more I get it. But it's weird for me, because people who hold Pinkerton up in such high regard, that also hold that album in a high regard. For me, it's so weird, because for me, personally, all the stuff I like in the Blue Album, they do in Pinkerton better. For what I like about it. You can
see the growth. It's huge growth.
But then all the other stuff, all the stuff that they don't do in Pinkerton, that they do in the Blue Album, I find they do in Make Believe way better. So for me, it's kind of like your Blue album, you split it into kind of raw feel, indie sound, garage band kind of thing, and rock, mixed with poppy, catchy kind of stuff. That's the kind of two things that ram together. And I find you separate them, and you've got Pinkerton and you've got Make Believe. And I think Pinkerton and Make Believe are so superior to this album by such a country mile. I think that 3 songs on Make Believe probably outdo the entirety of this album for me as an individual. So for me, the Blue album, it didn't have any songs that stood out for me, but that is, with a little asterisk, is tainted because all their big hits I've heard so many fucking times.
Sure. No. I think that's totally fair. It's funny because I just made a note of this because you were like, if I were trying to tell somebody this is the album you should listen to get into Weezer, it would be Make Believe.
It's pretty.
That's the album. If you're trying to say, like, if you had told your friend listen to Make Believe instead of OK Human, because if they're not into orchestral music, they don't get what's happening with OK Human.
Yeah.
But if you're like, Make Believe, here is a rock band making rock songs that are super fun and tight, and the lyrics are clever, and that's when Scott was comfortable being in the band because he wasn't even sure he was in the band with Maladroit. He didn't even know until they were doing the inside pictures for the CD that he was officially, because he was just told, you're just filling in for Mikey, because he toured for Green with Mikey and then he recorded it and they're like, it's still Mikey's band. And then they were like, Mikey's not coming back. And they didn't really officially say it. It was just like, you're in the pictures. That's how he knew. So that's kind of, because like the Island in the Sun video that Spike Jonze did, it's just the 3 of them.
Mm.
And then, Scott they didn't bring Scott because he wasn't officially in the band, even though he was just playing bass. So it's like that kind of thing, like the new guitarist for Duran Duran isn't in the band technically. Because it's like when Warren left, they replaced him. Like when Andy Taylor left, they replaced him with Warren. And when Warren left, they just didn't replace him. So like, we're done. You're just going to be guitarist for hire. You don't get to be in the band. Like we'll announce you when we're touring. We'll be like, people will know your name and be like, you're that guy in Duran Duran, but you're not in. It's just the 4 of us now. We're done with that. So that's what Scott kind of thought it would be at first. And he was like, fine, just got out of the Marines. What am I doing? I'm just living in Toledo, Ohio, or I could be in Weezer. Okie dokie. So I think you're right. I hear everything that you're saying. I mean, it's lower on my list. It's in the next tier. It's in the middle tier for me. Blue is in the lower part of the middle tier. Everything you say is true. It does have a different place in my heart. Because I was there at the beginning, so it's a little bit higher. But I think objectively and even subjectively, like when you think about what are the ones you go back to over and over, you don't really go back to Blue over and over. And actually, when Pinkerton came out in 96, there's another album that came out from a different band, Fountains of Wayne, who I've already mentioned, came out in 96. And that out Pinkerton's Pinkerton and it out Blue's Blue. Fountains of Wayne, that first one, just the 2, because Adam and Chris did the whole album themselves. They wrote it, recorded it, played all the instruments, and they hired the other guys in the band to tour. And then those guys stayed in the band. That first Fountains of Wayne album outdoes both of these by a country mile. That original Pinkerton. I agree the deluxe version of Pinkerton is better. Everything that you've said is true. So, I mean, but they're kind of still come in at the same place to me because I didn't even know about it until you told me. So it's brand new for me. If we did this again in 3 years, I may be able to be like, oh, okay, now I feel what that is. So I think you're right. Blue is in the lower part of the next tier for me.
Mm-hmm. So what's your next? And we'll, because people are going to get confused when we've got to number 1, we'll just briefly kind of skip through and just say them again. So your next back one,
the next above what would have been Hurley for me.
Yes,
yeah. So like I guess it would be whatever that is, 15 or 14 or whatever it is. That's actually where Blue comes in.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So it's not even there.
Yeah. It's, and again, I mean, this is just because I think then, and then just above that is actually Green.
Funnily enough, Green is up next for mine. For me, the 4 worst is it's Pacific, Blue, Black, then Green. That's
okay. Yeah, Green is right there, and again, Green. Listen, Island of the Sun. I know that's the big hit, but I actually love that song. Mm-hmm. I do think it's because again the melodies are glorious, and Brian gets to sing a lot on that. Knockdown Drag Out is a great song.
I love that song.
I love that
love it. That Oh Girlfriend.
I was just going to say,
amazing songs. It's so just good.
It's a heart wrencher. And so I almost feel kind of bad. Like I was like, is Green really that low? But like when I look at it, and again, it's not low. I listen to Green all the time. But like objectively, then just above that are the 2 Pinkertons, the regular Pinkerton and Deluxe come just above that for me. So it's kind of like, I mean, to say Green is their 10th best album. I think it is. But it's a really fucking great album. Oh, girlfriend.
That was one of the first songs that really clicked with me of Weezer. When I've been doing this discography, I was like, Oh Girlfriend, Knockdown, Drag Out, and then I think Crab is another one from that album.
Crab is
and
really
I was like,
good,
I actually put Green quite high. It was mid for me, like dead in the middle. Yeah. And then when I've been doing this re-listen, I was like, if I take out, because I don't like Islands in the Sun that much, I think it's all right, but it plays on the radio constantly.
Of course it does.
So if I take that one out, that I've already heard 100 times, that was what I thought was Weezer's biggest song, which I think it actually is. But
it is their biggest selling. It is their
Buddy
highest
Holly for me.
Yeah. And probably Beverly Hills.
Yeah, I don't rate Beverly Hills that much.
But I'm just saying, like, as far as pop...
I see what you're saying. Yeah, the top three, the big hits.
That people know, the biggest hits are those three. So,
and I listened to the Green album, and I was like, Oh Girlfriend and Knockdown, Drag Out, and Crab, they're three of my favourite Weezer songs. So I put Green quite high, and then I was re-listening to it, and I was like, the rest of... you take out Islands in the Sun, and my three ones I really like, there's not actually that much left. You're like, it's all right, but it could fun. Be if you released the Green EP and it was just 4 tracks, it would be like a perfect EP. Sure, and that's kind of how I felt with this album. I was like, yeah. So that's where I'm at. So okay, you go next. So now I know we're just all over the place. We're just have to talk. But it's hard to do a list without us being in the same room without trying to. Because I try not to show people the list because I don't want to get spoiled, but also I don't want people to have to go on YouTube to. There's a couple of podcasts I really like, and they started doing video, and now they're video reliant, and you listen just to audio version. Like the It's Always Sunny podcast, I love it because I love It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. But they're literally like there's certain episodes, and they're like they say at the start, if you're not watching on video, there's not really much point, and it's like. But I started this as a podcast. And
I prefer podcasts over video.
Do for the most part.
I can't sit, I'm moving around. When I listen to podcasts, I'm doing other things.
Same.
To watch a video, I got to sit and watch it.
Yeah, a video is a commitment.
I would like to engage with you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like watching an hour-long podcast is like watching a small movie. It's like I have to, whereas if I listen to, I can listen to hours of an audiobook doing other shit, It's
correct, 100%.
But my next one's going to offend you a little bit because I know how much you love it. But it is shat on a lot by Weezer fans.
It is.
It's Raditude. It's Raditude.
It's fair.
So Raditude, what I found very interesting is there are actually 3 different versions of Raditude.
Yeah.
So there's the standard one, which is about 13 songs and 46 minutes. Mm-hmm. Sorry, that's the standard international version, should I say?
Oh.
So there's the Okay, I've already made a mess of this. Right, 3 main versions.
My version is 10.
Right. Oh, so there's
10 plus 4.
Wow, there's 4 versions in. Okay.
Okay.
So you've got your standard version, which is 10 tracks.
10 plus 4 for the deluxe.
Yep. Then for the international version, there's an additional song, which you get in the deluxe international version and in the standard international version, which I get on Spotify.
Sure.
And then there's the, quote, standard international version. So there's the international version, the deluxe international version, and then the standard international version. All 3 of them are different lengths, has slightly different songs on them. So the standard international has got a cover of Kids and Poker Face, and then it's also got a Story of My Life on it. But the album
Story of My Life by Social D.
I think it might be a cover, yeah.
Life goes by so
I think
fast.
It's that one. I don't know the original well enough.
Social Distortion.
So that's really weird. But then the deluxe edition, you've got Underdogs and Prettiest Girl in the Whole Wide World, Get Me Some, and Run Over by a Truck, which Run Over by a Truck is one of my favourite songs.
That's so good.
When I found out that was on deluxe, I was like, they have robbed. Whoever bought the just normal edition of Raditude, they have robbed. Because Run Over by a Truck, I heard it once, I was like, this is quite weird.
So
the guitar or the bass line sounds like a truck revving. And I was like, this is just a really simple concept song that just works. So many levels.
Totally works.
So that song alone bumped it up for me. But it was out in 2009. I think it's a good album. I enjoy. I'd say Black, Blue, and Pacific Daydream are almost don't bother with unless you're a Weezer completionist. Green is, for me, I think just because of the 3 or 4 amazing songs, I think it just gets into the middle bracket for me. But Green and Raditude are just they're good Weezer albums. Mm-hmm. They're good. But as albums as a whole, for me, I found with Raditude is there are 5 songs on there that I like. One of them, In the Mall, I don't mind. But, If You're Wondering If I Want You To, phenomenal. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it goes. If You're Wondering If I Want You To, phenomenal. Put Me Back Together, phenomenal. Tripping Down the Freeway, phenomenal. In the Mall, pretty good. Running Down the Truck, phenomenal. But Run Over by a Truck, rather, phenomenal. But then every other song, I was like, I like the feel of the album. I enjoyed listening to it as an album. But when I was trying to pick out specific songs, that's where I was struggling. So that alone for me it doesn't quite elevate.
I hear that. And that's obviously much higher for me. And the thing about Raditude is, I would say, is it's a concept album. And so it's why it's a better album. It's a whole thing. And in the video, if you're wondering if you want, it takes place in Weezerville, population Weezer, which is maybe one of the greatest videos of all time. It's great. There's like little kid versions of Weezer. It's awesome. I think I shared it in the Discord the other day. But if you read the 10 songs, although Get Run Over by a Truck would actually work with the video for, if you're wondering if you want me to. So I just take the 10 songs as a concept album, and they haven't done many of those. So that's why I think as an album, it really works. And The Girl Got Hot, that is like a really specific, like, rom-com bullshit movie trope. And I think they're making fun of that. I think it's really meta. I think it's a meta album. Can't Stop the Partying, Lil Wayne's on there.
Well, that jarred me.
But again, it's all part of the concept. I think they totally know what they're doing.
I would, as I said, when Radioactive was one of those albums, I heard Can't Stop the Party with Lil Wayne, and I was like, this is weird. The more I hear it, the more I like it, the more I kind of get it. But it is also like, it kind of felt like Ed Sheeran to me. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, it's two things that for me personally didn't quite gel. But I did find an interesting fact, I'm sure you already knew, is that I believe it was Raditude. The name of that album was named by Rainn Wilson, who plays
I did not know that.
Dwight from the US Office. Yeah,
that's amazing.
He said Raditude to Rivers once and said you should name an album.
Can you imagine the two of those two just standing around?
Oh, talking.
Being the biggest nerds ever. Oh my God.
It would be incredible. I would love that. But sorry, I interjected. No,
it's fine because Raditude was dipping in and out of my top 5, and it ultimately didn't make it. It comes in at a hard 6. But it is very good. It is very, very good. I really enjoy it. I think because I read it, and one of my favorite singer-songwriters, Amy Mann, she put out a concept album that nobody really got, and it's one of those things where it's hard to do because, again, in this streaming age. But 2009 is when they put this out. God, I want to say, let me click on mine because, again, as you know, I buy albums. 2005, The Forgotten Arm. But it was, so The Forgotten Arm is this album Amy put out. And if you don't listen to it in order, I mean, she put a couple singles out, but if you don't listen to it in order, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. But you're like, oh, when you listen to it together, you're like, I get what you were doing. So that's just kind of how I've always, and then nobody's told me that. That's just my English teacher, Tony Farina, stretching thing that I do, stretch it. So
you mean
anyway,
your genius level analysis of just being a contrarian?
Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, and then so my next ones up are the two Pinkerton albums, and I know those are going to rank higher for you. I think they're great. Pink Triangle. Listen, anybody who went to college in America, I feel like who went to like small town conservative town. I'm not a conservative guy, but I'm from a small town conservative town. And you go off to college and you meet these people, and you like. When you're a liberal person from a small conservative town, you like gravitate towards like-minded people, which means odds are you're hanging out with LGBTQ folks because they're going to be a little more liberal-minded. And so every straight guy I know in the world at one point in time had a huge crush with a lesbian, myself included.
Oh yeah, I've done that. Yeah.
So Pink Triangle is one of the most brilliantly written songs, and I've actually heard a lot of people shit on Pink Triangle because they're like, they read it as Weezer's mad at her. The song says, I'm dumb. He's not saying, fuck you. He's saying, I'm so stupid. I thought she could be the one. We were good as married, but married in my heart's no good. And so married in my mind's no good. So you're like, yeah, he's just like, he's that guy who's like, oh my God, I found a person. And then, but going through that experience, it allows you to then say, oh, now I know how to just be friends with people. And so then you can go on. Like one of my best friends from high school, Beck, it's never been a romantic thing. Like it's a gross, like she's my sister. I whenever I text her or call her, I'm like, what's up, sister? She sends me things like, hey, little brother, or whatever. That's how we are. It's never been that way. But I always just thought, well, because she's Beck. You know what I mean? Like it's just one of those things. And so it's this whole idea that, it's the myth of when Harry met Sally, men and women can't be friends. I disagree with that. I think men and women are friends all the time. 100%. But I also think like some people need to go through the Pink Triangle to get there.
That's a good shout.
You know what I mean? So I just think it's a really smart. And again, it is just such an honest, raw, brutal album. I never disliked Pinkerton, but to me, it's like right in the middle. It is the middle album for me. It is very good. It shows you what they can do. I mean, El Scorcho.
I actually think El Scorcho is actually overrated, in my opinion.
Do you think so? I really like it.
Yeah, no pressure, pressure at all, or anything. Obviously, you and I know we never want to, never going to offend each other. But with Pinkerton, because the standard Pinkerton for me, I think that Why Bother's probably my favorite. Like, I think no other one's really great. Yeah. Why Bother's brilliant. The Good Life, but Why Bother? I found that when I was getting into Pinkerton, I got into the lore of it. I think the lore of Pinkerton really elevates it a lot. And I think there's 4 years where Weezer disappeared, and probably people sort of pre-internet were kind of getting crumbs and little bits and pieces, probably from like random interviews that Weezer were doing about this thing, and just getting like a little sentence here and there about what Pinkerton was. And they probably heard about the rock opera idea, heard about Rivers' surgery, all that stuff. I found that the isolation angle really helps Pinkerton. If you go into Pinkerton knowing Rivers was basically bedbound for like, I think it's months by himself, basically, and like in his mid-20s, like the sort of the peak of your socializing post getting really drunk and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. This is kind of like the mid-20s is when you start to tone down yourself, but you're still very social. And I found that it's like, oh, it must be such a struggle not being able to see these people. And I found for me, with Pink Triangle, I kind of perceived it more so like he's by himself, isolated, and he's kind of overthinking things. And that's, in a way, is like, oh, I thought she was the one. Clearly she wasn't, because I'm an idiot. I'm dumb. Yeah. But like, there's women, I think, or there's people that I think everyone who's listening has fallen for, apart from the very few people who are with their childhood sweethearts. And I know a couple of my friends who are like that, so kudos to them. But most people who aren't with their childhood sweethearts, at some point you fancy someone, or you maybe even think you're in love with someone, and they are like a friend of yours, maybe barely even an acquaintance, and you're like in your head with all these things, but every interaction you have with them, there's just no spark whatsoever. And you kind of set yourself in a knot, and then you realize you go, oh, you kind of either grow up or you finally find someone else that likes you back, and then you go, oh, that's what it was, or whatever reason people find. But for me, Pink Triangle kind of was that. He was just kind of by himself, isolating, overthinking stuff, and that's why he keeps saying he's dumb, because he's like, I know I can never get it, but it's nice to romanticize it in a way. So I do like Pink Triangle, but yeah, for me, where with Pinkerton, I found, Tired Sex is cool. It's quite heavy in a lot of ways, where I didn't expect. Yeah. And I was like,
it's an opening track.
I want more of this. I was like, and then I was like, oh, is this what Pinkerton I can see? And then they never do that again. I'm like, okay, that's what Weezer's next album should be, something heavy, but I'm always up for non-heavy bands doing heavy stuff. Yeah. But like, Get You is weird but cool, but then No Other One and Why Bother, as well as Falling For You. I love Falling For You. There's some of my favourites. But for me, the standard edition is actually the next. So for me, so far, I've got Pacific Worst, then Blue, Black, Green, Raditude, Standard Pinkerton. That's where I am at the moment. So these ones we'll try and vaguely skim over, because I do want to be able to talk about our favourite songs. But
we got to move through. So this is what we do.
I know, we could talk for 4 hours about this, and it is a band with 60-odd albums. I mean, Death to False Metal isn't even classed as a studio album, it's classed as a compilation album, which is bullshit. But so for me, the next album, so album number 10 of my 16, is Death to False Metal. So I think basically for me, I think Hurley, the Red Album, is it Maladroit or Maladra? Because
Maladroit, because like adroit is the word.
Oh, okay, because I thought it was like a French word, and I was like, I have no idea what this word means.
No, like maladroit is the word. It's the opposite. It's the bad version of being adroit.
What's adroit? I've never heard that word in my life.
To be like keen, to be aware.
Okay,
so like you're not aware.
Oh, so it's zoned out almost, like kind of. Oh, right. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because I'd never. And I don't know why I didn't look it up. Considering I spent like an hour going into the lore of Pinkerton, and I didn't decide to even look up what's been of an album.
Yeah. So like, I always think of it as being keen. Like you're not like keen, like I'm keen on that, but like I'm good at that thing. Like you're adroit, you're aware, you can do. And then maladroit. So like the thing that I like about maladroit as the title of an album is that they're not good at being a band anymore, and this is their third bassist in 3 albums. Yeah. So that was, but that's a banger. Anyway,
I like the, I think Maladroit and Raditude are both albums that work really well as albums. I think there are a couple of albums that work better as albums, but I think that the only reason they're lower on my rankings is just because each of them have got 4 amazing tracks that I love, and then the rest of it are just good songs. They were like, as an album, I listened to Raditude or Maladroit probably more than maybe some of my top albums, but because the top albums have got such phenomenal songs, like an example is the White Album. The White Album's pretty high up for me, but actually as an album, it's not that high up. It's just the songs I like on it, I like so much.
It's elevating it.
Yeah, and that's the problem. So I actually last minute I moved White Album down by 2 slots, literally today. But yeah, for me, so 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So from the top down now. So for me, 7 is Hurley Deluxe. 8 is the Red Album. 9 is Maladrot. 10 is Death to False Metal. Like Death to False Metal, it's really cool. Love the, I would say any listeners, check out the Unbreak My Heart cover. It's fucking brilliant. And then Death to False Metal is like, I didn't really know it was a B-side album till after the fact. And I was like,
they put out 2 albums in 1 year.
It really doesn't feel like a B-side album. It genuinely feels so well put together. So they're my ones. What are yours?
Mine are, so mine go like this. I would go Van Weezer, Maladroit, White, and then Raditude. That gets you to 6.
Okay, yeah. So funny enough, we're very close. It's just I think you and I have probably just swapped the White and the Red albums because I think they both mean a lot to us for different reasons.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
White's a banger. White's so good. I mean, Maladroit is one of those ones that again. It was in my dead zone. Green and Maladroit were in my dead zone. It's like just I was having a kid and then I was getting divorced. I had 2 kids and I was getting divorced. And I have an oldest. My ex-wife has a stepdaughter, and so that was just like I have a stepdaughter from my first marriage, and so I still am in touch with her and stuff. But it's like shit was heavy at that time, and so it wasn't like Weezer. You know what I mean? Like
Pinkerton, maybe that's probably the only.
But that's true. I was definitely feeling more Pinkerton at the time. Anyway, but it's just like you weren't aware of anything anyway. And so then, like I said, when Make Believe came out, and I'm single, 2005 is actually the year I met Lee. So like everything's on the upswing. I'm back, and so Green and Maladroit I actually kind of listened to together. Outside of the singles that were out, Maladroit didn't have any singles. Everybody shits on it. They are wrong. It is a very good album. It feels like it could be an excellent first album. It's really good. It's the first album, and it is. It's the first album with Scott, and it feels like that. They're getting their sea legs. There's some excellent singles on there. So yeah, and then Van Weezer is just so much fun. I love everything that it is. But again, and that's a concept album that I knew that for years they've been talking about doing it. So I love that it exists. I like Van Halen. Everything about it. White is very good, like I said, and then Raditude is 6, but it kept bumping back in and out of the top 5. But I'm leaving it at 6, so that's where I'm at. And again, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you asked me tomorrow, I'd be like, White is the 6th best album. Like I could easily say that.
Yeah. Well, for me, so 6 is Van Weezer. So it's
so good.
It was very close. It was between that and the White Album for me were the 2 hitting spot for 5. So that's my 5th is the White Album. But for the 6th, Van Weezer, the only reason I think Van Weezer isn't higher for me is because I think the first half of the album for me is phenomenal. Beginning and the end, I adore that song. I prefer the single version of it, the Wild Stallions version. But the album version is still good. But the problem is, I got so into that single, and that was like my jam for like 2 or 3 months. I remember you sent it to me, and I was like, "This might be one of the best rock songs I've ever heard." And then
good.
I was showing everyone I've ever met. I was like, "Hey, do you remember that? Do you want to get high song by Weezer that you really like, even though you never explored the band any further aside from that?" Yes. Here's one other amazing song that you are guaranteed to enjoy. It's just so fun and great. The first 5 tracks of Van Weezer are amazing. I just think the last 5, apart from One More Hit, because I love One More Hit, the last 5, for me, are just quite weak, but because the rest of it is so strong. And then I found out the 4 of the, I think, 10 or 11 tracks on Van Weezer, they've all got interpolation, so they give songwriting credits. Because I remember messaging you. Because Van Weezer and OK Human came out in the same year, which are very different albums. But Van Weezer, when I heard that song, Blue Dream I said to you, I was mad. I was like, I am mad because this is literally, and you're right. And I looked it up, but I was like, I don't want to hear an album where you basically, I know it's not stealing, but you basically fucking steal a riff from Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne, which is like,
and Randy Rhoads got credit.
No, of course, I mean, I think there's 3 people who wrote the Ozzy Osbourne track, but like, it's not even my favorite Ozzy Osbourne song. Mr. Crowley is, but Crazy Train, I'm like, if I'm listening to this, all it makes me want to do is either listen to Crazy Train or listen to something else. Why would I want to hear, it's a kind of a dicky thing to say, but like, why do I want to hear, it's not a cover, you're just kind of taking the best part of another song, trying to make something better out of it, which I appreciate, but it doesn't work for me. And then Sheila Can Do It, not a song I like. They interpolate Girls, Girls, Girls by Motley Crue, who I love. Motley Crue, saw them live, in fact. And Nikki Sixx changed my life, his autobiographies and stuff, but I'm not getting into that here. And then they've got a couple of other songs. There's Beginning and the End has got parts of The Longest Time by Billy Joel in it. And then I Need Some of That has got 2 Interpol things in it, which is Heat of the Moment by Asia, and then also Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult. Both songs I'd heard, and I was like, do they? And then I listened to the song, I was like, I can I can tell now. Yeah. So that the album is slightly weakened because for me it just feels like a tribute album. A really good tribute album. It's a great tribute album, but for me I'm like, you feel like this, once again, perfect EP, but as an album I think as a concept they just didn't quite have enough weight for me. So we'll get into the top 5. So just a little runoff. So ignoring your top 5, Tony, from 6 onward, just run through quick. What have you got so far in your order?
Oh, sure. Okay, so I'm going to go with 6 is Raditude. 7 would be, and again, these could all change, Maladroit, Van Weezer, or White, Van Weezer, then Pinkerton, Green, Blue, Hurley, Black, Pacific Daydream.
Cool. And then me, 6 Van Weezer, 7 Hurley, then Red Album, Maladroit, Death to False Metal, Pinkerton Standard Edition, Raditude, Green Album, Black Album, Blue Album, Pacific Daydream. So apart from 2 albums there, we are basically pretty similar, which is quite interesting from perspective of some 2 complete... I thought we were going to be like opposite, but we are actually very aligned. So it means that our top 5 are very similar as well. So
they are.
What is your number 5?
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm looking at our time. Should we just list our 5 and then kind of talk through them? Because we also want to do songs too, don't we? Do it. Okay, so my top 5. Number 5. And this was, listen, I've been struggling with this all week. Death to False Metal. Number 4, Everything Will Be All Right in the End. Number 3, Make Believe. Number 2, OK Human. And number 1 is the Red Album. Nice. I love the Red Album so much. All right, what is your top 5?
So, number 5 for me is White Album, but it's pretty close with Van Weezer. They're both songs, I think they're both albums that have 4 or 5 unfathomably good tracks, and the rest of the album lets it down a little bit. Number 4, and I changed it today to clarify. Number 4 is Make Believe, which I think is brilliant. Number 3 is Pinkerton, the Deluxe Edition, but that's because there's 3 songs in the Deluxe Edition that I think are so good, they elevate it, but I'll go more on that later.
Yeah.
Then, number 2 for me is Everything Will Be All Right in the End.
Oh, such a good.
Number 1 is OK Human.
Yeah.
Now, we are
mine
very,
are 2 and 3,
close.
And yours are 1 and 2.
Very close.
Let's talk about. Okay, so and again, we don't want to give the things we love the best the shortest amount of time, but here's why I struggled. So Everything Will Be All Right at the End. Rick Ocasek is back. He produced Blue and Green. Rick Ocasek of the Cars. Yes, that Rick Ocasek. He comes back. Every song bangs, and then they've got this weird outro rock opera thing at the end, and you're like, you've written your own little symphony at the end, which to me is the precursor to OK Human, which is the orchestral one. Every song on OK Human is good. It's probably Lee's favorite Weezer album. She doesn't really love Weezer, but she likes it as well. Yeah, and of course the AJR does another version of all my favorite songs, and Lee loves that one. She loves
Megan does as well.
AJR,
you got us into AJR, so when there's Weezer and AJR, we were, especially because I think where they're weirdly connected. It's almost like AJR, kind of the new generation of Weezer in a lot of ways. I kind of view them.
And
they're experimental and different, do their own thing.
Rivers was on one of their songs, and then the AJR.
Sober was I was trying to remember what the connection was, but I was like,
So they had him on, and so then they brought and
also the albums of released that year. Weezer released OK Human, and AJR released OK Orchestra, and both of them are orchestra albums.
Right, and it's
that's
all
not a
a nod. It's not, and it's all a play on Coldplay, OK Computer.
You mean Radiohead?
Radiohead, what did I say? Coldplay, sorry, Radiohead, OK Computer. So they're both saying, hey, thanks Radiohead for inspiring us to be these things, but we're really nothing like these things.
Yeah.
The reason Red is my favorite, and I just want to defend Red, because, I mean, Everything Will Be All Right at the End, and Make Believe, seriously, if you didn't tell anybody they were Weezer and you handed them and said, listen to these amazing rock albums, their doors would be, every song on there's not a dog on either of those albums.
100%.
OK Human is glorious for all of its orchestral stuff that we said. Death to False Metal is just an eclectic bunch of love. I love that album for all the things it is. It's like what I think Brian sees Pacific Daydream is. Like, I know he loves that album, but I love this album for all of that.
Well, I think I was going to say, I think Death 2 works really well. Sorry to interject, is because each song itself stands alone. Exactly. Well, they work in an album, but each individual track, even though I don't like every song, stands alone. I think that's very rare.
It's the opposite randomizer album.
It's almost the opposite of OK Human, whereas I think OK Human, every song is brilliant. I think OK Human is a flawless album, but
I do too.
It's hard to differentiate songs. There's like 3 or 4 songs that I think are phenomenal, and then the rest of them are like, these are just incredible songs. Could you decipher them? No, because I always listen to OK Human as an album because it's just that good. Sorry.
You can't skip. No, it's true. And the thing is, OK Human is a better album. Objectively, OK Human is a better album than Red. But Red is my favorite album. Mm-hmm. All 4 of them sing. It was the first time I really heard Brian's voice by himself and heard Pat's voice by himself. You hear them in the backgrounds of the other album. This is when they totally say to Scott, you're in the band, write this song. And that song musically, it's where you really make believe, which again, you'll notice the thing for my top 5, it's all Scott. I think Scott's made them a better band. And that line is, they didn't become a band until Scott Schreiner got there. And it's true.
Sketch.
His bass playing is amazing. He knows the assignment of being a bass player. He stays out of the way. But when they need him to drive a song, he can drive a song. And you can tell as they've progressed as a band, they've gotten, but like Maladroit, they're figuring themselves out. But Make Believe, Red, Death's a False Metal, and then, back the Everything Will Be All Right at the end. These are these great rock albums. But they just are quirky enough for me to give all the things that I love. But the reason Red is my favorite is because they all 4 sing. And then they got like Troublemaker, is just this powerful driving song, and then greatest human. What is it? Greatest. I'm the greatest man that ever lived. That's it. And I couldn't think of the exact name right there.
Nor could I.
That song is like this. It's almost like an old timey revival choir. I just can't get over all the things they do. 10 songs, 10 this, and again, Red. It's a randomizer album too, but they're 10 brilliant songs where this is a true band. It almost feels like my favorite Beatles album is Revolver. This is their Revolver. That's how I feel like. And most people's favorite Beatles album isn't Revolver because it's so incoherent. It's like Got to Get You Into My Life and then Tomorrow Never Knows on the same album. You're like, how is this the same album? That's why it's a great. All 4 of them are widely represented on Revolver, and I think Red is the ultimate. It's Rivers' band, but Rivers is also saying these are my guys, and so there's just some like kind of love there. So anyway, your turn. I'm going to drink some coffee. Sorry.
I'd say it's fine with Red. I agree with you in a lot of ways. I found Red for me is still a middle album because I think there's just a couple of songs that don't quite land, but it's an album with a lot of personality, and I really like again them experimenting. The song, I think it's The Greatest Who Ever Lived. Is that the one with his monologue thing in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate that.
Okay. You don't like it, you love it.
Well, that's it. I appreciate him doing it, and I'm glad. If I edited the album, I wouldn't take that out to clarify.
Yeah.
I just find that I find that I've not ever heard a song that's a rock song or something like that has a monologue in it that's just spoken word that doesn't come across as really either just out of place and shit or really like pompous. It's like, it feels like you're trying to elevate your music artificially to me. I'm like, what's cool about music? Not playing the music with it. It's like, no, you just kind of ruin the entire flow of a song, which it doesn't necessarily. I'm not saying with this song, that's me. I've got friends of mine who've got bands and they've got a brilliant song and then they talk in the middle of it. And I'm like, you have a great voice. You have incredible instruments around you and you're just deciding just to not. I know we know The Greatest is not silent. There is actually music stuff behind it,
the orchestral stuff behind it. Yeah,
and it's choir. I like the fact that Red do things so differently. But Red for me is a bit like Death to False Metal, where each track is its own thing. It's completely. It's as you said. I think randomized. You could just pop it on shuffle. Doesn't make a difference. It's
a different album every time because it doesn't matter. Right, yeah.
And there's some songs, Cold Dark World, I think is amazing. That's
the one Scott sings, yeah.
Yeah, which I think a lot of people don't agree with. And I really like, there's a song called Kings, which is on the deluxe edition, which I also think is fucking great. So they've got some bangers on there, but for me, it's again my own personal thing, because I like rap and I do like some spoken word stuff. For me, I'm just always like, why not just sing it? I know it's not the point. It's a really reductive way of looking at things because you could argue that with a lot of the music I like. Why do you shout? Why don't you just sing? But for me, I'm just like, it's like when people say do in songs, which we occasionally do.
They do, yeah.
Or when they go...
the Police wrote a whole song about it.
Yeah, or like lots of bands have done it and do it, or they just go, whoa. Every time a band does that, if it's background, you've got stuff going over it, I'm okay. If it's a minor part of the song or connecting part, I'm okay. When it's one of those pop songs that do it in the chorus, and it's like, if your main chorus lyric is whoa, yeah, I'm not going to like your song, because for me, I'm like, you can do that melody, but you can literally say anything. If you literally just go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I'd think that's more creative than just saying whoa, because it's just, you're just making noise. And if you're there's a song which I recommend to everyone, including you, Tony. Muse would actually be quite a cool band to do.
I know
this
who
on,
Muse
actually.
are. Sure.
No, I know you know Muse are, but I love Muse, and I most of Muse. They'd be quite an interesting band to do this kind of thing in a while. Can't do it too soon. We need a bit of time.
Sure.
But
yeah.
I think they would be an interesting thing to tackle, because they've got an album that no one seems to know about or have ever heard. It's called Hullabaloo, and it's just B-sides and random stuff, and most of it's just crap. But there's two songs on there I love. One's called Shrinking Universe, the other one's called Recess. Recess is some of the best and most interesting different guitaring I've ever heard in my life. Shrinking Universe, it's a song that has this sounds weird, but it's like a guitar solo but with your voice, which to me, most people go, that's just someone singing. No. He uses his voice like an instrument in that, because Method Bellamy has got such a high range and things. That song with him using his voice like an instrument, when you have scenarios like that and you do whoa-ohs, which I think the Brendan Urie of Panic at the Disco, he does a little bit, when you're using your voice as a secondary instrument, which is how I view a lot of the heavy music I like with shouting and stuff in, it can work. But I just think with Weezer, I'm almost like jaded, because I'm like, you've got such a cool voice, you do such good lyrics, and then there's this one time you're like, yeah, I'm just going to talk.
Sure. And isn't he in the Can't Knock the Hustle video?
What,
the
Brendan
guy
Urie?
from Panic? Yeah.
Probably.
I think he plays the Uber driver.
I think he probably does. It would not surprise me.
I think that's right.
So
anyway,
so that was my massive tangent about.
No, I love a good massive tangent. So I'm with you that OK Human is their finest piece of music. It's just because it's objectively it's great.
And I love orchestral stuff.
And
Everything Will Be Alright is 2. Oh, sorry.
You put 2 and I have that as 3.
Yeah, so for me, Everything Will Be Alright, I think, funnily enough, that last 3 songs, the only weakness of it is it's not one whole song. If that last 3 was one song, it would be my top album. But for me personally, it's just because those 3 songs being in 3 parts, they don't really work as individual songs. No one goes, I'm going to listen to part 1 and then listen to a different album. Or if you put the album on shuffle, Everything Alright works as a shuffle, except those 3 songs. Those 3 songs completely... So you basically go, here's 3 parts of a song, but rather than us keeping it as one, which would work brilliantly well, when I listen to music a lot of the time, I have playlists, and I listen to playlists on shuffle. Often I listen to like whole albums at a time when I calls for it, but a lot of the time I listen to whole playlists. So when I'm in a Weezer mood, I just put Weezer on shuffle and listen to lots of Weezer stuff. But those 3 tracks, I'd never want to hear them out of order because they're so good. And if that was one 7-minute song, I'd be well happy because I'd be like, oh,
gotcha.
Brilliant.
That's fair.
Just the only reason it's 2. So the number 3, Pinkerton Deluxe, very brief. So there's 2 songs on Pinkerton Deluxe that I think are 2 of Weezer's best songs, and they're really different. And I imagine the vast majority of people haven't even ever heard them, because you're a massive Weezer fan. You hadn't heard them, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
One of them is called it's something like I've Lost Everything by the Love of My Dreams. It's like a really long song name. I'm not gonna have to get it up now because I can't quote a song that I'm telling you to listen to and then not actually tell you what the fucking song's called. Sorry, scrolling through the billion of bloody songs. Here we go. So it's really far down in the album. It's literally like the fifth and fourth sort of last songs on the album is Long Time Sunshine. But the other one is I Just Threw Out the Love of My Dreams. There you go.
Yeah. And that's on the first, if you're like me and you bought it differently, that's at the end of the first album of the deluxe edition. And then the Long Time Sunshine, they're in the same spot on album 2.
Oh, fantastic.
Towards the bottom. They like hit them down there.
Yeah, because I'm on Spotify and there's 36 songs, but obviously a lot of them are tracking rough or live versions of stuff, and it's a mess. But I Just Threw Out the Love of My Dreams has got a female vocalist in it called Laura something or other, and I'll make a note to put it in show notes. But she's the main singer. Rivers is like a backing singer in that.
Yeah.
And it just works so well. I want Rivers to have more songs with loads of female vocalists on, because obviously that main song from Raditude
Go Away.
Well, Go Away's one on. Obviously Everything Will Be Alright in the end, and the song that Sarah Bareilles was doing, the main song of Raditude, the first song.
If you're wondering if I want you
that's
to.
it. So every time Rivers does a song with a woman, I'm like, yes, do more. We need more of this. And that's one of those songs that I was overlooked. And then the other song is bloody hell, Long Time Sunshine, which I'll get onto. But those two songs for me elevate the deluxe version of Pinkerton so much that it really, for me, adds to the lore of Pinkerton. And the reasons I like Pinkerton is the weirdness of it. And you are not gonna. I don't think I've heard a more odd song than Long Time Sunshine that works. Yeah. But most people I show to, like Megan, fucking hates that song. She won't even let me play it around her.
No, I love it. It's so beautiful.
But yeah, then Pinkerton's 3, Make Believe is 4. I think Make Believe is their.
Let's talk about Make Believe.
Their best. I'd probably say OK Human's their best musically album. I think Everything Will Be Alright in the end is probably their best album, but I think their best commercial album, which is probably, if you had to recommend, if you got 100 people to listen to Weezer and you listen to all their albums like we have, I think Make Believe is the most common one that would be in the top 3 of everyone's list, because it's got the big singles, it's got the ballads, it's got the whole album works in order, but also shuffling it works. It's just one of those albums that it's not the perfect album, but it's probably like 8 or 9 out of 10 on every single level. But you say it's perfect?
Yeah, no, it isn't, because OK Human is the only perfect album they have, but it is so brilliantly good. I actually was wrong. I actually do have this as 3, and I have Everything as 4. But I mean, it's a tight.
Yeah.
So if I had, because Red is an emotional pick, so I think this is their second best album objectively, and with Everything just squeezing in. And I think you're right about the end of Everything. Those 3 pieces to get, it's a weird choice. Everything about Make Believe is good. Pardon Me is this belter. You're My Best Friend and I Love You is a heartbreaker. Mm-hmm. And then they end with Haunt You Every Day. And you're like, that song shouldn't work. But this one can't, this is a whole album. When you get to the end, and especially because Freak Me Out is such a good song, but when you get to Haunt You Every Day at the end, Beverly Hills is the first song on this album. And Haunt You Every Day and that doesn't make any sense. And it's like, you see, this is the perfect progression of them as a band. Here's a rock song, Beverly Hills, it's silly. The video, they filmed it at the Playboy Mansion. Perfect Situation is the one where that starts off where there's the fake woman, they're Weez, and you can't have Weezer without Rivers. And so there's this whole video, it's brilliant. You go through this whole thing, ballads and bangers and punk songs and love songs, and then you get to Haunt You Every Day, and it's like, this is the progression of Weezer. So I think that's why Make Believe is, if you want to understand everything that they've done, every one of the songs is representative of a different album.
Yeah,
that's so I think it's the perfect representation of everything. You've got a heavy song. You can see that he wanted to be. I mean, Rivers' goal was to be a lead guitarist in a hair metal band.
Well, you could hear that in Van Weezer. That's their 100%. OK Human is to show off something that only a band with a lot of money could actually do, because getting a full orchestra and all that sort of stuff, composing during that stuff COVID is so difficult, but actually producing it and having faith enough in it's going to make its money back, all that jazz. So OK Human's kind of like the Hollywood blockbuster of albums to actually be able to make something like that. Whereas Van Weezer is like, we just love this kind of music. It's a tribute album to all their favorite bands. And so they're two polar opposite things that both came out in the same year, which is why I think Van jarred me a bit. But Make Believe, it's funny you say it goes through their journey, because the first song, Beverly Hills, I think is their weakest track. Yeah. And funnily enough, I think their first album, Bar Pacific, is their weakest. Yeah. And I think that Haunt You Every Day is my favorite song on Make Believe.
It's so good.
And, it's so powerful. When I heard the whole album, as I do, I listen to I don't shuffle when I first listen to albums and stuff. Listen to it start to finish, and I was like, Make Believe was pretty good. I was like 2/3 through. I was like, this is pretty good. I heard Haunt You Every Day, and I was like, wait a minute, what was that? So I listened to it all again. I listened to Haunt You Every Day like 2 or 3 more times. I was like, okay, I got to give the album another go. And then I was like, oh yeah, I was kind of anticipating. I was waiting for Haunt You Every Day, but on the way, I was like, all these songs are so good. Bar Beverly Hills, I think, is probably the weakest track on the album, but love Haunt You Every Day.
Yeah. And then if we were to do Season as one album, and I know we want to rank Season in it before we get to our top 5.
Yep.
I would actually, Season would be 6. It would bump Ratitude. Season would come in at 6 for me if it were its own album. I love it that much. I think it's brilliant.
I think Seasons will come in at... I think if Seasons existed, I think it'd be OK Human, Everything Would Be Alright, Pinkerton Deluxe, Make Believe, then Seasons.
Oh, you'd put it at 5. I put it at 6. So
I think Seasons. I think Seasons. Yeah, I mean, White Album's my 5th, but mainly it's because Do You Want to Get High? It's emotional. It's what first got me into Weezer, like properly. Do You Want to Get High is one of my favorite songs. Go We Got a Good Thing is mine and Megan's song. Like that's one of the first songs we ever listened to.
She played that on ukulele.
Yeah, and we sent you.
You sent it to me. Yeah.
And she's got me this thing, which I don't know if it's around. I think it might be downstairs. But she got me this lovely. It's like a thing you can get online, and it's like a it's like a CD symbol, and it's got the lyrics of "Go a Good Thing" going around it, and there's a little Spotify code that if you scan it with your phone, it goes straight to the song.
Nice,
and it's beautiful. And she got me that.
We have a big thing on our wall of the Jack Johnson song "Better Together." It's a big thing that hangs on our wall, and it has our names and the date of our wedding anniversary on there, and that's hanging on our wall.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. So Go a Good Thing is our song. That's what kind of got Megan interested in Weezer.
So good. Yeah.
And then Do You Want to Get High is what got me into Weezer. So the White Album, not the best album, but for me, emotional. But yeah, Seasons for me, I think is probably on par-ish with Make Believe for a different reason. I think Seasons... Oh, very quick. How would you rank Seasons to 4 EPs? So for me, I'd say I think I'm saying the opposite to you. I think Spring is the worst. Mm-hmm. I think they just almost get better. That each one they release is better than the last to a degree. So for me, it goes number 4 is Spring, number 3 is Winter, number 2 is Summer, number 1 is Autumn. But 3, 2, and 1 for me, Autumn, Summer, and Winter are like a hair between them. Spring is only a bit weaker for me because I don't like 3 songs on Spring, whereas the other 3 EPs only have 1 song each that I don't like on them, which I think for a 7-track EP to have only 1 song I'm not that into and have 6 songs, not only do I like, but I go back specifically to listen to. I actually know Summer's got 2 or 3 tracks I don't like as much, but because Summer's got Blue Like Jazz, Opposite of Me on it, and I think Records as well.
Records is amazing.
Yeah.
Records is on Summer. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also Cuomoville I think is great. I hated it when I first heard it, and then the more I listen, I'll go, you know what? So sorry, what's your Spring Seasons ranking?
So I would go Autumn 4. I'd go Autumn, Winter. Well, in those last 2 songs on Winter are so good. So I guess I would go Autumn, Summer, Winter, Spring is my favorite.
Exact reverse of me. Exact reverse.
Yeah. And it's the first 3 songs on Spring are perfect.
Yes.
And I can listen to them on repeat. I taught myself a little bit of love on ukulele. It's only 4 chords. You just got to play them in different order. Angels on Vacation reminds me, and it's so weird, but if you ever read Preacher or watched the show Preacher.
I know of it, but I haven't, no.
There's these 2 angels who run away from heaven, and it always cracks me up to think that maybe Rivers was like thinking about Preacher. Right, and I know he's not, but I just think of those douchebags. Opening night is, of course, about Shakespeare, and it's written to Vivaldi. And, of course, the reason on OK Human, there's the song about books, Grapes of Wrath, which is brilliant. So it's like they're like after my heart. So I know that on our top 5 songs, we each have songs from the seasons.
Yes.
So let's delve. We're slowly running out of time. How do we do this, Michael?
I know, and we actually rushed through as well.
You. I know, as Megan did to you recently. Okay, I'm going to do my top 5 songs, and then I'll do. Okay, so where's my list? Number 5 in the Garage from the Blue Album. It is a song about being a dork. And it is the song that sings to me the most. I mean, they mentioned Kitty Pryde.
Yes.
As
soon as I saw the X-Men reference, I was like, I get exactly why Tony's into this. As soon as the X-Men.
Kitty Pryde. Yeah.
So that's a very lyric video. That's one of the songs that you listen to. Check the lyrics, because I did when you told me it was your favorites.
It's not musically, it's terrible.
Which is why I don't like the Blue Album very much.
Yeah. Number 4 from the White Album. Thank God for girls that... I can listen to that on repeat 5 times in a row. Number 3, Records, because again, it is me. It's how I live my life. I just don't want to.
It's also so fucking catchy. You can't listen to that song twice in a row and then not have it in your head all day. It's just impossible.
All day. Yep. Number 2, Back to the Shack.
Nice.
What a song! Because again, it's Weezer saying, let's be Weezer. And then number 1, because it is the story of my life growing up in the 70s. As I've said all the time, the 70s were trying to kill us. Let's get dangerous. Hey, Dad, my friends have these new ninja swords. Is it cool if we smash up this place and get dangerous? That was my whole life. Like, that whole song is about growing up in the 70s. And I know Rivers grew up on a commune, like in Connecticut or something, or upstate New York, somewhere up there. And so it's like, oh, I grew up on my grandparents' farm. You're hanging on the back of a pickup truck. I learned how to drive a tractor when I was like 4. I was slightly older than 4, but I mean, it was real. I was maybe like 6 or 7, and I could drive a tractor by myself with the trailer on it and a load of peaches. Like, it's insane, my life. So I love the music of Let's Get Dangerous and the sound, the car crash at the beginning. But those are my top 5, and then some of the Ain't Got Nobody is an excellent that's in the that guitar solo. That's an honorable mention. Grapes of Wrath, Odd Couple, Those are the honorable mentions could go on and on, but those are, I just stopped at 3.
I have 100 songs on Spotify that I have liked
that are
for
honorable
Weezer.
mentions.
So it's literally like I could literally go on to my top 100 Weezer songs.
I could too, but you told us to do 5, so I did 8.
Well, I've got 7 written down. Okay, so I was like, I didn't want to do like 10, and then tell Tony, you do 5. I'm going to do 10.
Yeah. So I did 7. So you can, if you got or I did 8. Yeah. So if you got an 8th one, you want to add in there. Yeah.
So basically, with yours, also anyone listening, check out Let's Get Dangerous, and I checked out the lyrics as well for that I read that and I was like, that's Tony's childhood. As soon as
it's my whole childhood.
I was like, that is literally
so good. Yeah.
So for me, I'll think of an 8th later, but my 7th is Grapes of Wrath. I think that's probably the best song on OK Human, but it's pretty close with all your favourite songs and Aloe Gooby. I just think those 3 songs.
First 3 songs are perfect.
And that's why one of my friends said, I listened to a few songs and then stopped. I'm like, you heard the first 3 songs on that album.
How could you stop listening after them?
What do you want from albums?
I don't know.
What is OK Human hears the first 3 tracks and goes, this is what I'm going to turn off. It's like, no, wrong answer, wrong. But even their slow songs on OK Human are great, which I'm not a fan of really, really slow, boring ballady songs often. But even things like Playing My Piano or Screened, I love it. So
me too.
6 is Can't Knock the Hustle. That would it would be 5th if it wasn't the 5th one is one of the most different songs I've ever heard in my life. So Can't Knock the Hustle. Anyone listening, I've said it to quite a few. Just go listen to Can't Knock the Hustle, even if you don't like Weezer, even if you do listen to nothing else we talk about. Just listen to Can't Knock the Hustle. It's so fun. It's so
all
fun.
Day long. It's in your head, and you do this when you
you just shoulder dancing.
You have to move.
You got to shoulder dance while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Amazing. So 5th for me is Long Time Sunshine. So I think that's probably the best song on Pinkerton. And I think it's one of Weezer's best songs. I've shown it to a couple people. Most of my friends who are really into music like I am, in the same sort of way, say, I don't like it, but I kind of get it, but the production isn't good enough for me, which I understand.
It wasn't supposed to be released. I mean,
exactly.
It's you can't get Matt back. Right. But what makes it so good is Matt's wailing voice. Like, I think it really is haunting because he's not in the band, but he's clearly such a huge part of that song. It's really 100%. Good.
And it's also, it's not like anything else Weezer's released. It's not like anything else I've ever heard. You hear the first half of the song, and also listen to, you probably only be able to find it on YouTube or Spotify, but like, listen to the song, and the first half, you'll be like, why does Mike like this song so much? Yeah, Long Time Sunshine's kind of catchy. The second half of the song completely changes. You've got about 2 solid minutes of a cappella singing, but it's harmonies, but it's counter melodies, but it's also dissonant. So they're singing like wrong octaves with each other, and it all shouldn't work. And it's like, it's purposely making, like when you hear someone play piano and they're playing like wrong notes, but they're doing it in a way that works. That's what Long Time Sunshine is. Everything about the ending is like wrong and dissonant, and you hear it the first time and you're like, it's jarring. You're like, what the hell is this? But then you just revisit it. And you revisit and you go, I've not heard, it's just so intriguing. It's like a slow motion car crash. You can't look away. You can't, every time I talk about Long Time Sunshine, I have to hear it because I've never heard anything like it, but ever. So for that reason alone, it's just phenomenal. 4, Tastes Like Pain. It's not a single. Obviously Long Time Sunshine wasn't a single either.
It's from Autumn.
It's from the Autumn. And it's because it uses Winter by Vivaldi, which I think is one of the greatest orchestral pieces ever. And so he just makes it somehow better. So phenomenal, top tier.
All of Seasons is Vivaldi. Like because Vivaldi did the 4 seasons. That's what it did. So it's exactly. Like every there's at least one song on each album that deliberately, because you don't have to pay for it because there's no copyright on Vivaldi. They're like, oh, thank you very much. We'll write a song about this.
Tastes Like Pain is my favorite Vivaldi song, and they've just wrapped it up. I love that.
It's so good. Yeah.
It is. Now 2 and 3 are swapped over today. So 3 is Beginning of the End, the Wild Stallions edit, and that's the single version of Beginning of the End from Van Weezer. The only reason today I swapped it was because I found out that they basically did interpolation from Billy Joel, and for that reason I'm like, a good reason I like your song is actually from someone else, so it gets knocked down a bit. It's still a great song, but
that whole, even though the video they made for that, it's like, you guys know Kiss, and then they don't even do Kiss, they do Billy Joel, which makes it even funnier.
I love it. It's such a good video. It cracks me up.
And honestly, I sobbed through that whole movie.
See, I didn't watch it. I haven't even seen. I'm sorry. Megan's never seen Bill and Ted, so I have to go back and rewatch Bill and Ted.
Sure.
But I don't know if she's going to like it much. She's never even seen Dumb and Dumber.
That's okay. Well,
she's not seen something about Mary either. So it's like,
but Bill and Ted's. But anyway, it hit me at the right moment. It's like when I watched Trainspotting 2. It was the same thing. It was like I sobbed my way through that because I didn't I didn't go back and watch the original two Bill and Ted's. I just watched the third one with the memory gaps. And I did the same thing with Trainspotting. I watched Trainspotting when it came out. And then I watched the second one. And I saw the original Trainspotting. But when I watched the second one, I would even argue with myself. And as you know, in the second Trainspotting, their memories are faulty.
Yep.
And so it was like, I'm so glad I watched it this way. And so it got me in all the right places because I'm their age, you know? So it's just like, it just caught, I mean, I was not expecting the Bill and Ted Face the Music to be that good. And the love letter to George Carlin by having Kristen Schaal play his daughter, and they named the character his daughter's name, George Carlin's daughter's name in real life.
That's
so
amazing.
I just thought, it was just like, anyway, sorry. We're not here to talk about Bill and Ted.
No,
We've only got a few minutes left.
It is. So number 2
That's
for me.
That's a great song.
It is, beginning and the end. That's the song that, when I heard Do You Want to Get High, which, spoiler, that's my number 1, but I'll get to that in a sec. When I heard
As you've said it 50 times. If
I know, I keep talking about
it. Do You Want to Get High?
And I was like, it was a song I obsessively showed fucking everyone. I was like, don't matter if you like Weezer or what, this song got me into Weezer. This was the song that erased Buddy Holly and all the other songs I heard from them. I was like, oh, this is different. And it came at a certain point in my life, which relates to the song. That's all I'm going to say about that. But so it just connected with me quite a lot in that realm, you know, both the song, what it's about, but also just Weezer in that time. Second single from the White Album, so that's pretty good. But I skipped over one. Number 2 is Da Vinci, which is Everything Will Be Alright in the End. Da Vinci is the third single from that album. I love Da Vinci. And what I like to do with Megan sometimes is I'll try and get Megan to listen to music. But I've realised now is if I tell her to listen to something, it doesn't matter what it is, she's not going to like it. So what I do instead is just incessantly play songs I know she's going to like around her and wait for her to tell me she likes it. Or we've got a playlist together called Eminem, and I just put music I like that I think she'll like in there, and music she likes. I listen to albums I like. She loves Ed Sheeran. She hasn't even listened to the new album. I did. Picked out the best songs and put it in this playlist. So I do that quite a lot.
Yeah, the new album's really good too.
It's fun.
Actually, I found it really very, really very good. Yeah. A lot of dance stuff, totally different. And again, back to the thing, we like Ed Sheeran on this show. I
like Ed Sheeran.
Here to,
he's great, and he's a great
really
guy,
fun.
Which really helps. He's a lovely guy, just like the guys of Weezer, I'm sure. But for me, Da Vinci, it hit so hard because I just think it's catchy. Lyrically, it's so clever. And Megan, when she heard even Rosetta Stone can't translate you, the second she heard that, she tuned straight in, because she speaks 4 languages, obviously, for listeners. And so she immediately clocked in. She was like, I like that lyric. And as soon as she said that, I was like, I fucking got you. I've reeled you in. Got you with the Weezer.
It is such a great song, too. Yeah. And and the thing about Everything Will Be All Right at the end, the reason it comes up so high for both of us is it is a rock album. It's a pop album. It is smart. It doesn't shy away from the smarty pants. And I think the reason that Thank God for Girls is on my list is because he does the really fast thing. You know, if you've ever seen the video for that, it's really funny too. He's playing like a huckster, a preacher. So he's like dressed in all white, the girl at the pastry shop. And so the lyrics are super fast and he's having a lot of fun, but then it's like, there's the middle part where they're like trying to describe how he makes Eve, and it's told from this perspective of somebody who thinks they've maybe have read Genesis, where he's like, God took a rib from Adam, you know, mixed it up in a centrifuge machine, mixed them up with cardamom and clove, microwaved it on the popcorn set them, and you're just like, you don't know what you're talking about. So it's like somebody who doesn't know anything about religion trying to talk about religion. And really, and then it's like, Thank God for Girls. And again, and I know they're adult men and they say girls a lot. A lot of their songs have girls in them. But again, that's a callback to something. You know, it's them capturing that youth thing, and they're not saying all women are girls. That's not what it's doing.
But lyric rhyming and how things just flow. Like saying woman just doesn't fit in a song very often, but with girls flows quite well. It's
totally true. And so it's just so fun. And so it's, again, because lyrically, the thing about the White Album, and I know how much you like it, is it's catchy, it's silly, but it's also acknowledging some really, really smart lyrics. And I think the thing for me, and the thing I would end on, is that Weezer is lyrically, one of the greatest bands of all time. Mm-hmm. The songs they write together, you know, by themselves, the songs like Go Away, there's a co-writer in there. A lot of the stuff from Raditude has co-writers. But lyrically, they're some of the smartest stuff ever. And some of my and you mentioned singer-songwriter. So like Michael Penn, the older brother of Sean Penn, is a singer-songwriter. He's married to Amy Mann. He's like, I don't fanboy a ton, but like if I ever met Michael Penn, I would probably like have a heart attack. Like he's one of just my all-time favorite musicians. I love everything about him. And he's writing simple songs. They're just dudes with guitars, but lyrically, he gets me to a real place that I love. And Matt Nathanson is like my Michael Penn replacement. He's a singer-songwriter who still is out making albums. And I love him too. And so that's the thing about Weezer is they're a rock band with singer-songwriter sensibilities. And I love singer-songwriters. That's why I like, LL Cool J and old school hip hop, which I still call rap because I'm old, is because it was lyrically smart. Old LL Cool J is really not only talk about rhyming or like KRS-One and Boogie Down Productions, the stuff that Public Enemy did, Weezer captures that. They're like, the lyrics are part of it. It's not just like throw away lyrics like you're doing like the whoa, whoa, whoas. You don't love that. But it's like, here I'm saying words because they rhyme, rhyme, rhyme. I can do this all day, every time. And that's fine and whatever. And they do that sometimes, but they do it intentionally. And so to me, what makes Weezer great is the music, of course, and that since Maladroit in 2002, they've been the same lineup, 20 to 21 years of the same solid rock band, but lyrically they keep challenging us. And so I love them. So thanks for doing this.
It's all good. And for every air quotes bad album they have 4 brilliant albums. And also, their bad albums aren't bad. They're just okay. They're
just okay.
They're just great music to put on in the background and not paid so much attention to, but it's not going to cause anyone offense. But
Well, that's the thing about Pacific Daydream is musically, and that may be why Brian loves it so much, is musically, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And so if you and like you said, nothing sticks in your brain, but Pacific Daydream is definitely a good work in the background album because you're not going to be offended. They're not asking you too much. But musically, they're all playing really great songs together,
Exactly. And the last thing I'll say as well, bouncing off lyrics, is I completely agree with everything you say about lyrics. They're very smart. This is a band. It sounds like we're being douches now, almost.
We are.
It's a band for people who like music. Like, if you're really into music, you will find a Weezer album or some Weezer songs you like. Like, I don't think it's possible, unless you're an elitist or something and only like one genre. You listen to Weezer, you'll find some stuff that sticks. And I just think with Everything Will Be Alright in the End, the title of the album, perfect, because it literally says that things aren't always good, but it will eventually get there. And that's the whole theme of the album. That's the whole theme. That's a running theme of my entire life. Is I start off pretty good, had a bit of a rocky patch, when 3 members of my family died in 2 years, including my dad. And then I went for like a little, substance spiral. And then I popped out and I'm like, hey, I'm okay now. Everything is all right in the end. Okay Human is literally just one of the genius levels of that, and why I love Grapes of Wrath so much, is some of the lyrics are really clever, but a lot of them, like Hello Gooby, it's just a curry. You can buy at a curry house. Like, it's nothing complicated.
But it's not about that either.
No, and it's also, exactly, in Grapes of Wrath, it's literally just a song. The main lyrics of the chorus is literally just putting my headphones on, chuck on Grapes of Wrath. It's talking about listening to an audio.
Gonna rock my audible headphone, Grapes of Wrath. It's so good.
To oblivion. Yeah, it's one of those things that's like, this is just a song on the surface about someone listening to an audiobook, but it's there's so many more layers to it, and that's what I love. It's like an onion. It's like Shrek. Weezer has layers, and that's why we bother with Weezer, which is what I'm calling the name of the album, the name of this episode. Why bother with Weezer? Which is also one of their songs. So I'm talking for 2 hours, Tony. I'll put all the information about you in the show notes, including the Weezer SNL sketch, as well as the name of that lovely person who has been in the track that I mentioned. I just fell in love with I just threw away the love of my dreams or whatever from.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll put her name in there as well as anything else, as well as everything to do with Tony. But Tony, tell people very briefly, where can they find you?
Sure. The simplest way is just go to arfarina.com. which is my website. And actually, in my newest newsletter, I made a secret shout out to you in particular, because the first time you realized that my name was Anthony, you said, "Is your name Anthony?" Which is fun because that's not how we say it in America. And I love that. And Anthony Horowitz has written, the guy who writes the Alex Writers, he's written a whole series of books where he's in them himself. And everybody calls him Anthony. And of course, it's spelled Anthony. And in America, I've always called him Anthony Horowitz. But the guy, the partner in it, the Sherlock Holmes, that always calls him Tony, and it grates on him. And so it's just a funny thing. But anyway, so my newest newsletter, which you could sign up for at my website, arfarina.com, I say to my UK friends, but it was specifically because of something you said. Oh. You're like, "Is your name Anthony?" And I was like, "Okay, yes, it is." I'm not thinking like, yes, that's of course how you say it there. So anyway, sign up there. There's a link to all the podcasts I do. There's a link to the Genuine Chit-Chat podcast link, because I've been on Genuine Chit-Chat, so I want you to go listen to that. And you can just get all the stuff. The information for my book will be there. And any way to get hold of me, arfarina.com. That's the best way.
Wonderful. Everyone listening should already know, but at Genuine Chit-Chat's where you can find me. Please let us know in any way possible what you think of Weezer, if this has made you listen to them, and your favourite songs and albums. We would love to hear it. But Tony, you're a delightful human being. Talking to you is always one of the best. I'm so happy this is the second podcast of 2023. Wow. I've been looking forward to this for so long, for like 4 or 5 months. We've literally just been like waiting for season's winter to come out. It's like, just come out so we can talk about it.
I know,
just
and I'm glad we waited, because at first we had thought, well, we would wait and just do a year of Weezer and like just discuss seasons. So I'm glad we decided to do it this way too, because we were going to do it like at the end of December, early January, but giving us a month to sit with seasons, but also to think about them as a whole. And this is the most Weezer thing we could do, is to spend 2 hours talking about Weezer.
That's what we do, and Rivers will be proud. Let's hope. It'll be love if Rivers.
You don't even I understand Rivers more than Rivers understands.
He hasn't been himself since 2000. Oh man, check out the SNL sketch, friends. We will speak to you very soon. Thank you as always for listening. We love you, and we love Weezer.
Weezer, Weezer, Weezer.
Keeping that for the end.